didn't work at all because I was totally muted. Thank you for that. Hello, everybody, and welcome. It is so cool to see you guys already like engaging in the chat box. We are here today to talk about authentic collaboration and kind of the why behind how we're building a world that is ending homelessness and how we're doing that with everyone together and engaged. I'm stumbling a little bit, sorry. I am really excited that we're all here. I want to name that like this is a 4-hour training in Zoom. So I know we're all really thrilled about that. I really want to encourage everyone. I'm seeing all this activity in the chat and it makes me so happy. I want to encourage everyone, please, to stay as engaged as you can. We're gonna have a couple of breaks today, but like we are really gonna want to ensure that my brain just went dead, sorry. We want to just ensure that we are here together today. I know a couple of people in the room already, which makes me super stoked. I'm going to move us over to our next chat, our next slide. But yeah, I'm super stoked that y'all are all here today and in full transparency, because this is what authenticity is about, right? Is being like our whole selves. I'm a little bit nervous. This is a big training, a lot of folks in a long time of like talking and engaging and talking about some hard topics. So I'm going to ask that y'all give me the grace of being a whole human and ask that we give each other, all of us, the grace of being whole humans in this space, which means you got babies crying, you got dogs barking, you need to go get water, you need to go to the bathroom, like go do the things you need to do. And like, if you got to take a step out and take a breath, do what you got to do, right? Like, we want to make sure that everyone's able to be here. And that means taking care of the parts of ourselves that sometimes in our work get overlooked. And so if you're on camera and you've got a kid in the background, literally, it's totally fine. Like be a wholeness of your human selves. With that, we'll do an introduction slide. So I am Rhie Azzam Morris. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am mixed. I'm quite white presenting. You'll see a list on this of the different identities that I hold. You'll see wife, cat mom, avid reader, poet, activist. I am a person with lived experience, an advocate, a speaker. I am also someone who does HUD technical assistance. I am also someone, I'm currently in Spokane, Washington. That's where I moved to. However, I am born and raised in Texas. I was born in Dallas and ended up hitchhiking for a while as a late teen, early 20s, wound up in Austin following a boy, because who doesn't do that when they're in their early 20s, and wound up as what they call a drag rat, affectionately term a drag rat in the city of Austin. So I was on the street in Austin for quite a while, ended up getting off the street through a community that I had built, and you'll hear more about that throughout the day. And then wound up going back to work in this field and work at LifeWorks in Austin, which had been the last organization where I had received services.
Sorry, I need to turn this down.
I'm gonna hit mute. Oh no, where we go, we got it. I am also, I don't know, like, why are you here and listening to me is kind of what I'm trying to frame up for y'all, right? So I have all these things, but one of the things is that I have been really seeing the gaps in our system in terms of how we are engaging with clients or with people on the other side of the table. You'll hear me say that a lot today. And the ways in which we really lack the kind of, our system teaches us a way to be, right? And the way that our system teaches us to be is something that we're having to dismantle while also working within the system. So I am here now considered an expert, right? Like because of my lived expertise, but because of the work that I've done, I helped edit and develop the plan, the federal strategic plan to end homelessness. So I am got to work on that this year and work on like the pieces around engaging folks with lived experience, which is really exciting. And I do YHDP, so that is the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project. I'm a coach on that project in multiple communities, including Tarrant County. And I have been working on the Coordinated Entry Racial Equity Initiative as a coach as well. So that's a little bit about my background. I'm really here because people tend to hear me because I don't speak in HUD speak. I speak in like real life speak. And so I'm hopeful that today, not that HUD speak isn't real life speak, it's a part of our speak too, right? But like, I'm hopeful that through our work together today, we'll be able to frame up a little bit about what does it mean to really like sit on the other side of the table, and what does it mean to really engage and work alongside people with lived experience, seeing them as whole people and not just the circumstance that they're in. So that's a little bit about me that probably took a little too long. I'm gonna pass it over to Tanya, who's co-facilitating today. I'm super excited. So Tanya, please tell folks who you are.
Hi, everyone. I am Tanya Hughes. I have so many different identities that I identify with. First off, my pronouns are she, her. My ethnicity and race is Cajun and white. I live in Texas City, but have spent more time in on Galveston Island. I am a mom, I am a daughter, I am a sister, I am a powerful advocate. I am a person with lived experience. And now as a direct service professional, I work for an agency that just a few years ago, I was a client at. So I'm on both sides of the table where I work at. Since I've started working at Gulf Coast Center, I joined a community advisory board as a founding member of an organization called Galveston Co-Care, and was within 6 months to a year voted onto the board of directors. And it's just been a journey. My lived experience was 17 years in drug addiction and 45 of those years being in unsheltered homelessness. So I guess what I'm really qualified to speak about is, the lived experience portion and the intersectionality of the different aspects of coming out of homelessness. So now I would like to invite you guys that haven't already to check in and introduce yourselves in the chat. If you could drop your name, your pronouns, your race, and your community role, we would really appreciate it. And after you do so, I'm going to ask you guys this question and answer it myself. What does it really feel like to be heard for you? So I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to drop your information in the chat, and then I'll answer this question for you. Okay, and while you guys are dropping that stuff in the chat, I'll go ahead and start answering that question. Oh, there we go. For me, what it really feels like to be heard, I guess I'll go back to like the first time I really felt heard was when I first started working where I work now. And when leadership would come to me and ask me questions regarding my lived experience, and I would see that those answers actually made program changes. And to me, like, I felt really empowered in that space. And I don't think I'd ever really felt that before. So for me, being heard is very empowering. And, and that empowerment, knowing that your voice made a change happen, a positive change happen. It's just so powerful. So let's see. Does anybody want to take a moment to come off and mute and maybe answer that question? Tell me how it feels for you to feel heard.
Hi, Tanya.
Hi, Caitlin.
Hey, I guess I will go first and answer that question. What does it feel like to be really heard? To be really heard to me feels validating, and you feel human, truly like a real person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Caitlin, for sharing that. And y'all, by the way, Caitlin is my coworker who has filled the position that I previously held on my team.
Hi, this is Sonia Ortega from Grand Prairie ISD.
Hey, Sonia.
Hi, and to me, how does it feel to be really heard? Feels wonderful. I'm in a lot of boards within my community. And before I wasn't being heard, but as soon as I became a member of these organizations and then I got invited to the boards and I'm speaking about what I do and the help that I need. And now it's like everybody's just standing in line. How can we help you, Ms. Ortega? And that feels wonderful.
Doesn't
So
it?
anybody out there, if you really want to help your community, be a part of it. You know, join your clubs and organizations, the Lions Club, the Optimist Club, the Grand Prairie United Charities, the Camp Impact for disability, the Texas Camp Disabilities for Children. I mean, just join your organizations and advocate for your community.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ortega.
You're welcome.
I want to uplift too. We have in the chat box some folks saying like weight lifted, relief that I have an ally in my process. That was really powerful to me. Feeling like I'm connected, like we really are, comforting to be heard, like someone is connecting with me. I'm trying to scroll up because I don't want to miss folks. I feel heard when others respond to me in a caring manner and make an effort to understand. Thank you, Ms. Richardson. It feels like a relief when you are really heard. It's uplifting and powerful. And yeah, uplifting and powerful. Let's see, there's rewarding and self-gratifying. It feels meaningful. Someone in here, I saw you in here. And if I mispronounce your name, I apologize, but Trina, stating like that you have never truly felt heard. That I'm like, please send me an email. Let's hang out, because we gonna work on that. we gonna work on that together, because it's really important to have those moments and to have that connection. Someone says, what came to mind when I thought about what it feels like to really be heard is to feel human and feel hopeful. Being heard to me is being acknowledged for the hard work we are trying to do for our homeless population versus looking the other way. I think being able to speak at tables I never knew existed and actually seeing my ideas put into action is amazing. Yes, Jess, I love that. Yes, I connect to that deeply. I'm still navigating how it feels. This is a third career for me, and in the longest previous career, woman in tech, I was so rarely heard. So I'm learning to accept it as genuine when it happens now. Really, I want to thank you all who put stuff in the chat box and invite. Is anyone else like want to speak and come off mute and share? And also, just as a heads up, this is preparation because we have in discussion questions today. So if you are comfortable coming off mute, please. And be warned that at some point, if we have a lull and I see your little box and my little box, I'm gonna call your name. Now you cannot answer and that's allowed, but just a heads up on that. Also, I see Vicky has come off mute, so I'm gonna pause for a second. If you're speaking with us, Vicky, we can't hear you. How ironic, given the question at hand. Okay. Well, does anybody else want to share? Like, what does it feel like when you're really heard? I'm gonna ask for maybe like 2 more people to come off mute, please. And like low key, I'm friends with a couple of you, so don't make me have to call your names out, because I'll lean on that, rest assured.
I'll try.
Thanks, Kaylin.
I feel like being heard feels like respect, like somebody is taking the time, making the eye contact and listening and not kind of writing you off. So yeah, respect comes to mind for me.
Thank you, Kaylin. Really, thank you. I see in here in the chat, we see it feels validating. It makes you feel validated and important. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to invite you all to really sit with this question and just think about it throughout today. And while we're talking and going through our, yes, somebody said it can be scary. It means accountability. Yes, 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 Amy, that is so real. Accountability feels terrifying, right? A lot of the time. And that is down to like our culture. If like, this is my thought on this, so I'm sharing it with you. Culturally, there's this idea around accountability that accountability equals consequence equals punishment, right? But, and we're going to talk about that in our second session a lot more in depth, but accountability really truly is just about like owning the thing and changing the behavior. It doesn't have to mean punishment. It just has to mean being like ownership of it, right? And like that can be really scary, but part of that is how we grow and how we level up and how we learn. And when we are doing that, especially on the side of folks in this room who are like like professionals or whatever, I hate that. We'll get into that later too. But for folks who are like service delivery people and folks who are working in this field, like accountability is really important for us to be like leaning deeply into, because one of the things that we're doing is modeling that it's okay to make mistakes, right? That it's okay to do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing, that it doesn't mean when we're out there in the streets, sometimes like the wrong decision can mean death, right? So it gets real scary and you get out of the street life, you get out of that world and you start going, I can't make mistakes. I can't do anything wrong, because if I go down the wrong alleyway, I'm not going to wake up tomorrow morning. That's a very real thing that a lot of us in this space who do have lived experience have faced, right? And so it's really important when you're building relationships with the folks that you're walking alongside. You'll also not hear me very often say in service of. I do not like the concept of you are serving people. You are walking alongside a whole human being who is on a journey of their own life, and you are there to be a support for that person, right? You are there to be a resource. You are not serving someone. You are walking alongside someone who is fully capable when space is left and allowed for their power to shine through. And part of the way we are traditionally trained, especially in like social work, is that there's a lot of like, there's one right way, this is how we do this thing, this is what we're supposed to do, and if you're not doing it that way, you're doing it wrong. And the reality is no one in this room can tell any other person what they're doing is right or wrong. You cannot speak to someone else's experience when you have not had it. If you do not know what it is to go through those to have to make those choices, like if you've never had to make the choice, you don't get to have an opinion on the choice that's made, is my opinion. And you will hear me say that a lot today. And so I want to thank you all for sharing these pieces around what does it feel like to really be heard. I want you to sit with that feeling in your body as we go through this today, and remember that part of your role is to be the person who's hearing, right? That's why it's important for you to remember what it feels like for you, because part of what you do and part of the power that you hold in the positions that you are in is that you are holding the onus of being the person who is hearing somebody, and often for the very first time. Like, and there is power in that, and there is vulnerability in that, and we'll get into that in our second session. I kind of took over this slide, Tanya, apologies for that. I'm going to take us into, before we get to the next slide, which is a quote that I just want us to sit with for a second, I want to share with you as well, when we're in this today, like, look, this is the balance of state over the state of Texas. This is a huge geographical area. This is a huge, like, diverse area of human beings, right, that we're going to be talking about. And I want to name, we're going to be talking about some things today that may not feel super comfortable, that may not feel necessarily like that's going to get our dander up a little bit. I know that's going to happen. I grew up in Texas. Like, while I grew up in Dallas, my whole family is from Beaumont. I grew up spending my time in East Texas, in Tomball, in Conroe. So I don't come to you as someone who is like a totally like out of like what's the word I'm looking for, like city focused, city oriented, right? I recognize the balance of state is a rural area, and there's a lot of differences in what that means in terms of how we engage, how we work, what our cultures are like. The cultures are so wildly different in the state of Texas, right? So I want to invite you all to really hold to the difference between what a safe space is and what it is to be safe and what it is to be comfortable. And I'm going to say that some of you are in this room right now with your bosses. Some of you are in the room right now with perhaps the executive director of your organization, perhaps your direct supervisor. Some of you are in this room with people that you supervise, right? We want to ensure that at no point will you be asked to put yourself in a position where you are in danger. We will not ask you to share things that feel uncomfortable. We will not ask you to share anything that will put you in some level of like, there's retaliation potentially, right? We're not like, that is not being asked of you in this space. What I am going to ask of you in this space today, though, is that you sit with discomfort and let yourself feel a little bit uncomfortable, because a lot of the things we're going to talk about today and how they tie into what it is to truly authentically engage and collaborate and walk alongside someone, a lot of the things we have to challenge internally do not feel good, like at all in any way. And like, that's real and honest, and you have a right and a space for that. We ask though that you lean into it, like ask yourself questions when something comes up for you. Like, give yourself a second to look at that and go, I'm wondering what's coming from this, right? And maybe you don't do that in this training today. Maybe you walk away and it's tonight in your shower, or it's 2 weeks from now. But I'm gonna ask you to really like be okay with being a little bit uncomfortable, but do not put yourself in a position where you feel like you are unsafe. So there's a difference, right? And like, what we want here is a brave space, but we want an intentional space that keeps you safe, because we do have to talk about some hard stuff today. And I do want you all to be engaged. We're going to have a couple of activities. We're going to have a breakout room. And so if you are like, I have done this a million times, so this is coming with no judgment. But if you are here right now and your camera is off and you are muted and you are like answering emails, or you're in another meeting or something like that, just please be forewarned that we are going to have breakout rooms, and we do really want you to be present for that space if possible. So with all of that said, I'm going to leave you before we get into the agenda with this quote from Audre Lorde that I start almost every one of these trainings off with, which is, those of us who stand outside the circle of this society's definition of acceptable women, those of us who have been forged in the crucibles of difference, those of us who are poor, who are lesbians, who are Black, who are older, know that survival is not an academic skill. It is learning how to take our differences and make them strengths. So I'm going to sit with that for just a second. It is learning how to take our differences and make them strengths. And for those of you in this space who do not have lived experience, what I really want you to hear in this quote is that last line. When you are out there, you know how to take your differences and make them strengths. Adaptability is survival. And so one of the things, like, I don't know if any of you have done trainings on strengths model, if you've done trainings on housing problem solving, trainings on these approaches, right? Our differences, yes, Trina, our differences are our strengths. Absolutely. We'll uplift that 100%, right? It is important that we are engaging and working and walking alongside folks with lived experience, recognizing what strengths they have in ways that stand outside our traditional cultural, like dominant cultural norms and expectations. Like, how do you celebrate these things that your traditional background in teaching might tell you is not a positive thing, right? So part of what you're going to be, what we'll be talking about is like, how do we do that? So yeah, survival is not an academic skill. It is learning how to take our differences and make them strengths. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Tanya to tell you a little bit about our agenda today.
All right, so today we're going to cover the following topics. We're going to talk about power across the table. We're going to talk about intersecting identities, implicit bias, dominant culture norms, and trauma and its impact.
Thanks, Tanya.
You're welcome.
So yeah, so let's jump in, right? To power across the table. What am I talking about? So here's the deal. We all hold, and we're going to get into intersecting identities and what that means. you all hold intersecting identities, and perception and the way in which we see one another and the things that we see and how we understand what we see, all of those things inform the way in which we show up every day, right? And so when we talk about power across the table, and this is going to be, I think, uniquely a unique challenge to accept, particularly for those of us who have lived experience and now work in the field, right? Because there is that power dynamic and play out of like, well, I occupy this identity of marginalization. And also when I'm sitting here and have a client in front of me, I'm the one holding all of the power in that dynamic, right? Like I am the one who represents a system of oppression. And like, we all represent that. And like, I know what I just said is like, oh, and it can make people go, whoa. And we're going to dig into a little bit about systems and why and how oppression shows up. But when all of today is really looking at how power plays out across the table between us and the people that we're working with. And I want to name too, that a lot of what we're talking about in authentic collaboration, and if you're a director in this room, if you are someone who has like that level of power in your organization, I want you to hear me when I say this. All of this also applies to the folks that are like doing direct service, like also applies to the folks that we are working with, right? Because authentically collaborating is about the wholeness of who we are as humans and the ability to have like, you know, we talk a lot about trauma-informed care and healing-centered engagement. So if you are a director in the room, I want to challenge you to listen today, not just in the lens of how we engage with folks who lived experience, but how is your organization engaging with the folks who are like lower on the hierarchy, the organizational chart, right? What are you doing to ensure care and compassion is being given to the folks who are walking alongside directly every day, the folks that are going through the challenges and the vulnerability of what it is to be homeless, right? So I want y'all to be thinking and kind of thinking through kind of two buckets, if you will, right, as we go through this today, because a lot of this applies also to how we treat employees and how we treat our staff that are really out in them streets doing that work that is really hard, right? Like it is, like I've done it all the way from and I was the coordinator for the Austin Youth Collective, where I worked directly with the young folks on the round 1 YHDP in Austin, all the way up to being like, you know, co-chairing equity task force, to now being like this weird coach thing that I do for HUD. And like, it's kind of unbelievable to me still. So that's why you'll hear me say things like weird coach thing. So as we're doing this today and we're going through this, I really want you all to be thinking not just in terms of like how we're engaging with folks who lived experience in our organizations, but if you are in a position of power in your organization, how are you engaging with staff in the organization as well? So perception, right? Seeing the person before the circumstance. When we walk into a room as a person with lived experience, when I walked up to a table and knew that I was going to need to ask for services right away, and before I even opened my mouth to talk to you, I knew that you saw me as a difficult population to work with, as someone with little potential for success, and as someone who was, quote, unwilling to pick myself up by my, quote, bootstraps. Bootstraps mentality is like the bane of the culture here. Hold on one second. I'm getting distracted by the chat, y'all. Timothy, I am going to read this later. I cannot read it right now while I'm talking, but I really appreciate you putting thoughtfulness into our chat. I got myself distracted. Apologies, friends. So when we think about perception, right, and the way that it impacts how we engage with one another, yeah, that very first piece of this is you are always representative of a system that has caused trauma, whether you want to be or not, right? All a system is a collection of people who have agreed to work in a certain way together. Systems are people. We are those people. We are those people. And it doesn't matter what intersection of identity that you carry, in terms of like, and we're going to get into intersections of identity next. That's literally the next thing we're going to do. But it's important to note that like when you are the person providing the resource or the service, you are being looked at across the table immediately as someone who doesn't get it, doesn't understand, represents a dominant culture that's been causing me harm my whole life, represents everything that is bad, right? When I was working at my organization in Austin, we had a program where there was a single case manager, and the only case manager for that program was a white man. And we were in like a case conferencing one day, and he was an awesome dude. Like I liked him as a human, but he was talking about a young man who had come in to receive services, who was a young Black man, and who said out loud, and a lot of people don't say this out loud, but said out loud, like, you're just another white man behind a table. What are you going to do for me? Right? Like, and the reality is that the onus is on us to build trust and to earn respect. And I think that's one of the hardest things that folks deal with in this work and in this field, is that there is a dominant cultural idea that, you know, you give respect to people, you know, we are raised to like show your elders respect, to show respect in this way, to show respect in that way. And we are raised that respect is just a thing that you give. But the reality of the work that you're doing is that you have to earn respect, and you have to earn trust. And you do that by showing up as a whole person. And you do that by checking in on your own kind of recognition of your own, like, ways in which the intersecting identities that you carry show up, and your own implicit biases, another thing we're going to talk about today, and how they show up. So when you are engaging, it is not just you and the person that you're talking with, right? It's the whole myriad of world around you and the power that's there, and whether that power plays out, and it can play out differently. You may be somebody that is like doing street outreach, and frankly, I've been in the field. That is not a powerful position within like the overarching hierarchy of organizations, right? And you still are a gatekeeper in that you have access to resources and information that the folks you're walking alongside don't have. And part of what we're hoping for through this, right, is to like transition and start the work of becoming liberated in your gatekeeping. What does it look like to share knowledge, to share information, and to do so in a way that doesn't like break the bonds of whatever red tape you have? And I know that you have red tape. I know there are things you can't talk about, right? That's part of this work, and that's okay. But what does it look like to like show up and be honest, right? Or the biggest mistake organizations make is that they aren't willing to own the mistakes that they make. That's the biggest damage that they do. They're not willing to like have egg on their face and publicly say like, hey, we messed up, and this is what we're doing to address it. And if we can encourage more and more for organizations to be willing to own when they misstep, and to start the process of what does it look like to be like, hey, we know we messed up. You guys have all heard the term iteration, right? Everyone knows, oh, it's an iterative process, right? We make mistakes and we move on and do the next thing. But the thing that's always missing in the iterative process in our field is that we're not accountable to the harm that we caused in the first place. The iteration is that we say, we know we made mistakes, we're going to move on and build something new. But what we don't do in that process of building something with our lessons learned is we don't be accountable to the harm we caused the actual human beings that we learned that lesson on their back. And so what does it look like to be accountable to that harm so that that harmful effect doesn't snowball throughout your iterations? Yeah, I'm going to pause there and ask if anybody has any reflections or thoughts. I'm seeing so much stuff in the chat that I wish I could read. Oh, I love that. Thanks, Axton, for the history lesson. Thank you, Heather. Yes, that is the point, and why I hate the bootstraps mentality. We are not all born with boots, laces, or straps. And so, yes, thank you. I love this. I love this. Heather, I don't know where you at, but like big ups for that. And Axton's explaining to us like where the phrase pull yourself up by your bootstraps came from. It's attributed to a late 1800s physics school book that contained the example question, why cannot a man lift himself up by pulling up on his bootstraps? So when it became a colloquial phrase referring to socioeconomic advancement shortly thereafter, it was meant to be sarcastic or suggest that it was an impossible achievement. So the irony that today it's like the cultural, like pick yourself up by your bootstraps, dog, but originally it was like meant to be an impossible accomplishment. Yeah, we get it. All right, yay. We're gonna dig some stuff with that. Go ahead, Tanya. I'm sorry, boo.
Oh, nothing. I was just laughing. But I would like to lift up Timothy's comment. And in regards to feeling heard. He was just saying that, you know, from his perspective, he really feels heard when his clients or the people he's assisting hears him when he is coaching them or guiding them or providing them support with a place to live, furniture or household goods to help them grow in a new life, a safe life, a new life, where they can build a solid foundation, even if it's a physically disabled senior who just needs a place to live where they can safely live out the rest of their life, or a young person with a mild mental disability who wants to work, that can work and gets a job and moves forward. He says that having those people hear him as he works to coach them and help them find meaning in their lives is what touches his heart in an extremely powerful way. To be heard, oh, my screen, there we go. To be heard at such a level reminds him of why he does what he does. I just thought that was really powerful. And for me, like that speaks volumes to also why I do what I do in a way that I had not thought to word it. So thank you, Timothy, for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya, for uplifting that. I really do love that. I really do love that. And I think that when we talk about this kind of how perceptions have an impact, right? And we talk about how we want to see a person before their circumstance. That is all anybody wants and needs in the world, right? Like, I mean, that's not all anybody wants and needs in the world. We all need like safety and like, you know, housing, all of those things. But when we boil it down to that human connection, it's like, I just want you to see me before you see what you think I am, right? And the problem is our brains are designed in such a way that like we can take in, oh no, I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to talk about implicit bias in a little bit, so I'm not going to say that part yet. But you know, the struggle is that we are very much like designed to have kind of stereotypes in our heads because that's how we hold information. It doesn't make us good or bad. I want to be clear about that, right? What the challenge becomes for us when we do this work is, do we recognize when we're having that reaction based on something that's a stereotype or based on something that's right in front of us? And we often, you get into this field and you've been doing it for a long time, like people get burnt out in this work. That is real. And you start to just see somebody and go, it's another case that's just like this case I saw 10 years ago, or just like this, or just like that. Y'all, when I was in AYC, I did that, right? I looked at a number of the young people that I walked alongside in that work and was like, oh, y'all are just like I was back then. In fact, right as I was exiting that work to start doing the national coaching, like this work, there was a young person there who, when I had left my kind of street family and street life, I had a little, you know, my culture, because it is, you know, I think we often forget that like homelessness is a subculture. It is not a counterculture to dominant culture. It is in fact a subculture. It has been made to be lesser than, though all of our hierarchies are the same, right? Like it was wild to me to get into a professional environment and in this field even, and see the ways in which people interacted with each other, that it's like, this is not any different than the bullshit we talked on the street. Like it's all the same stuff. Like it's all the same, like high school, like hierarchy, like groupings and this and that and the other. And so, and I think that because homelessness is deemed as this like subculture, it has this really heavy impact on like who you are. And then before we move into intersecting identities, because we're going to do a little activity there, but before we do that, I want to share with you that I got involved in doing this work on this level because I was co-chair of the Austin Travis County Racial Equity Committee, and we got pulled onto a HUD project that was at the time called the Racial Equity Demonstration Project. And we were on a national cohort call, right? Like doing a learning similar to what this is. And a woman came off mute, and they were giving us a training on implicit bias. And a woman came off of mute who's like a doctor of psychology somewhere. And because our trainer was referencing this research study that she had been a part of, and talking about implicit bias and the ways in which we categorize people and take in information and what lights up. And the study they had done, they put nodes on people's heads, and they were scanning what parts of the brain lit up when people were shown different images, right? So this was specific to racial equity, specific to the racial equity demonstration project. So they were really heavily speaking on race in that. And this woman comes off mute and very casually, knowing there are people with lived experience in the room, right? Because every team had to have lived ex folk, because that's not tokenizing. And but they knew we were there. And this woman very casually just says, oh yeah, to this group, it might be really interesting to you that when people were shown, I'm going to pause really quickly. If you are a person with lived experience, what I'm about to say might be kind of triggering. And if it is, please shoot me a private message in chat, so that because that's going to help me be able to tailor other things I say in this training. And if you need to step away for a second, do whatever you got to do, because when I first heard this, I had an actual trauma episode. This woman very casually in this room said, you guys care about homelessness, so you might be interested to know that when people were shown images of people experiencing homelessness, 97% of the time, the part of the brain that lit up for people was the part associated with objective disgust. It was the part that was associated when people were shown images of toilets and vomit. And I had a full-on like trauma response to that. And I was on that call with one of my colleagues, Claire, and she saw my face on the screen and messaged me and said, are you okay? And I was like, nope, I'm not okay. I got to step away for a minute. I went outside and smoked a cigarette. I was like actively like smelling the heat off the concrete on the church steps that I used to sit on, and remembering what it was like to be homeless, and remembering that experience of being like I used to think people just didn't see me. I didn't realize that they did see me, and they associated it with being subhuman, being unhuman, right? Not being a human being. And I think that it's really like, I went back into that training actually, and they were still kind of talking about it. No, you good. I'm going to drop an F-bomb or two. Just be warned, everybody. That's going to happen because it's my natural speech pattern. So don't even worry about it, Jess. But I went back into that training, and they were still speaking on implicit bias, and I came off mute and I lost it. And frankly, I did have a trauma episode in front of all these people. And I was like, I don't know how the hell we moving on already. Like, y'all need to go back and talk about, like, did you hear what this woman just said? Because I'm going to tell you the impact that had on me. Like, I lost it in front of this whole national room, right? As a community member. I wasn't a coach. I wasn't a trainer. I was just a random person in that room. Over time on that project, because I spoke up so much, they asked me if I would like to come do an authentic engagement training similar to this one, and then asked if I wanted to be a subject matter and expert. And then by the end of the first round, I was pulled up and became a coach and started helping design round 2. So it was really amazing and really awesome. But also I got where I am today because of my trauma. And I got where I am today because I was seen as a person with lived experience who happened to also have some other skills. And so when I talk about seeing the person before the circumstance, if you go back and look at those slides, that introductory slide, PLE, first of all, I didn't spell it out for you, because if you don't know what it means, then great. I don't really want to tell you. And it was so low on that list, I bury it. I do not want to lead with my lived experience any longer, because frankly, leading with my lived experience leads to a double-edged sword, right? Of people don't expect much out of you. So you can come into a room and cuss. I cuss at HUD, y'all. I straight up have cussed. I have straight up been in a room with HUD and gone, y'all doing this wrong. I don't know why you think like y'all are sitting over here and you need to What's cool is they changed the thing that I told them they were doing wrong. So that was dope, right? But they expected me to come in and be not polished, right? It's expected of me to show up and be like smoking on camera and cussing. And there is a double-edged sword to that. One, it gives me power in the space because I know you're unassuming about me, and I know you don't know nothing about me, and so you're expecting this. So then I can drop some knowledge, and all of a sudden it's like, oh dang. But also it undermines who I am. And it's important that we remember that that label of lived experience, whether we mean to or not, it's undermining the person in the room every day. So if you are walking alongside, if you are employed, if you have a colleague with lived experience that's out about it, be mindful and pay attention to how they're being treated by people in the space, and call that shit out, because you have that access to like that access to proximity to privilege that a person with lived experience just doesn't. And that's okay, right? Nobody's better or worse than anybody else in that case. But what I'm going to challenge all of you to do throughout today, and when we move in, this is such a great accidental segue, when we move into talking about our exactly. They want to blame the person because they don't know what to do. And sometimes they're just mean. But the other thing is the mistake of thinking we don't know what to do. Because I make a decision to do something that you don't agree with doesn't mean I'm making the wrong decision. And what your agreement with about my decision doesn't really matter, because you're not here to be telling me what I'm supposed to do. You're here to be helping me find resources. You are a librarian, right? You are not the person writing the paper. You are the librarian with access to resources, access to the books. You know where to send people. Your job is not to tell the person writing their paper, you're not writing the paper the right way and you need to go over here. Your job is to hear what the person is telling you that they are writing a paper on and go, I know where to find resources to get that for you. Hey, Wendy, I love it. Yes, I love that. I'm working with librarians in Ohio right now doing a social, like, yeah, we'll talk about, we won't talk about that, but it's a really cool thing we're doing. And I love that we have librarians in the room. So perception matters. And we're about to deep dive into how our perception shows up and how our identities show up and impact our perception. Let me pause for a second, actually. Does anybody have any like reflections on what we've just been discussing? Does anybody want to like, has anybody got a burning desire to be like, Rhie, you are so full of shit and let's get into it, because that's my favorite thing. So if you hate what I'm saying, come to me and let's talk it through. I like welcome that. I love that. Because I don't know everything. Y'all are the experts of your own domains. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I kind of wish I would say that, but I don't have that to say. I don't have that to say. However, I will say that just after hearing what you said, that it's brought some things to my mind that I'm not going to mention at this moment in regards to some things that I didn't previously notice in my work, in my work environment.
That's the goal, right?
Yeah.
Is just to like, is the goal of this today, y'all, my goal today for you guys is straight up to just walk away with a lot to think about, like, and really interrogate for yourselves. Like, this work is, it's like, yes, it's systemic. We know it's systemic. We know it's a system, and we are that system, like I said earlier. So part of that, like, part of our work, I'm muting you, honey, not because I don't love you, because I don't think you know you're not muted. Part of our work, right, is that I don't know how to say this well, which is not good, because that's why I'm here today. Part of our work is to recognize that, like, we have to do our own work, that like it expands beyond working in this field. What you will learn and what you will do when you start to challenge yourself is yes, Jess, yes. I'm like, I want to get all the Lived X folk that are on this call together afterwards. Let's do a debrief. I mean, not after we've been on the call for 4 hours, but maybe sometime before we do the next training, because I would love to just talk with y'all. So know that I have put that offer out there, and we'll work it out. I'll hit up somebody, Jim from THN or something. But I got myself sidetracked. This work I'm challenging you to do today, and I'm asking you to do today, it's internal work. It is the work we have to do, challenging our own assumptions, challenging the way we approach other people. Because at the end of the day, y'all, when I first started doing, I did a training. This is all based out of a training that I started doing when I worked at my organization in Austin. And they were like, hey, can you do a training on authentic engagement with young people? And they gave me this book called Street Culture, and it was written by a white professor from some college who had no lived experience. And I was like, I'll do a training, but this resource material is garbage. Although I did take a couple of things from it that we'll talk about later, because they blew my mind. But I used to joke, like, sardonically with my friends about, oh my God, you guys, they're paying me to train people how to treat people like they are people. And like, I think that it's important we remember that at the root of what we're doing is human beings. So the work that we're talking about and what I'm going to ask you to challenge in yourselves, it's not just going to be about who's sitting across the table from you. It's going to be about in your own life. How do you show up in the world? And that's a big ask. when you're just like coming to work to do a job and go home, right? But the work that you're coming to do every day is someone's life, right? Like really, like I hate when non-lived ex people say, oh, we do this work because people are dying on the street, because they don't know people who died on the street, right? Like they don't like they use that like it's a token message. But I'm telling you, as someone who lived through it, right? Who like I went in 2005, between April and August, I lost 13 people in my street crew because of some bad drugs that came through on the street, right? But like when we talk about people die out there, they're real lives who have stories like your stories. What I'm challenging you to do in your work is to see the human on the other side, the wholeness of who that person is outside of just this one experience of this bad time or hard time, or maybe they're celebrating it. Some folks, I loved it. You couldn't have gotten me off the street for the first like 3 years I was out, because I was like free. I had escaped a really bad situation. I was safer living outside than I was living inside. Like you couldn't have forced me to get into housing, right? And I needed to be able to work with people who saw that in me and saw that what I needed from them was support on like, where do I find some food? Like, I don't need to like take a drug test in order to get access to this, like, you know, what service. I just need these things. And when I'm ready for something else, I'll come and ask you for it. And like, you can offer it, but you can't force it on me, right? And if you saw me as a whole person, you wouldn't be trying to. I don't like that. I'm sorry to hear that. Instantly causes doubt of what you're capable of. Yes, Craig. So with all of this said, I never did finish the story about the young person I was working with. The point of that was when I got off the street, she was coming in and she was like one of the babies, you know, like one of the new little ones in my crew. And then when I ended up at the Austin Youth Collective, we started working together, and she had grown into like the me back then. Like I was Mama Rhie, you know, and like then I was working with this young person and they were like Mama young person in that same crew. And it was just wild. And it's a lovely story, and I'm sorry that I don't have time to share it with you, but I did want to nip it in the bud because I left it open a second ago. But I want us to talk about intersectional identity. Who here is familiar with the concept of intersectional identity? I can't see everybody, so if y'all want to throw up some thumbs, some yes, we know what that means, some acknowledgement that we all here together today. I'm like scrolling through the pictures I can see, y'all. Hi. Hello, faces I'm just now seeing. Cool. So intersecting identities is a rough concept for a lot of us, right? The faces I can see on the screen right now, trying to not make assumptions. So the way I'm going to speak, what I'm seeing on the screen right now are female-bodied people. Some are older, some are younger, some have tattoos, some have glasses, some have, listen, I'm covered in tattoos. I'm in Washington, it's cold, so you can't see them. But if I was normally presenting, I'd be in like a tank top. Yes, come through, look. Oh, y'all, look at this. Actually, that is a picture behind that flower is a picture of the alleyway. You probably can't see it because I got my screen sharing on, but that's the alley I last slept in as a street kid on Guadalupe. And I got a sunflower growing up out of it. So yes, you know, we're all different people and we have these different intersecting identities. And you've heard me say that a few times. And the thing about intersectionality is we intersect on accesses of proximity to power and privilege, and on accesses of proximity to oppression. And we all do, right? And that's the thing. We all carry some type of identity that falls somewhere on this spectrum of access to full power entirely and access to nothing entirely. And that's what can be so hard when you hear me saying that you are operating in the power position when somebody's sitting across the desk from you, in the broader power dynamic of the situation, in the cultural and social dynamic. You hold the power, whether you are somebody who used to be like, you could be somebody with lived experience who's a Black person, who's a woman, who is in a fat body, who didn't go to college. Like you could have all 5 of those identities, but if you sit across the table from somebody who's sleeping outside and your job is to be helping them, all of those identities become the identity of power, right? So when we talk about when we talk about white supremacy, and I know that can make some people uncomfortable, but we are going to talk a little bit about that later today. But don't check out because it's real good. And I promise I'll bring it to you in a way that doesn't feel bad too much. But like when we talk about how white supremacy erases white people, I don't know if you've ever heard this concept before, but when we do racial equity trainings, we talk about how white supremacy erases white people because what happens is you now represent whiteness before you represent anything else, right? So your individual identity in the same way that like, and it is that concept of stereotyping, right? So because of our implicit biases, look, this all ties together, I'm telling y'all. But when you are holding a power position, right? Power erases your identity the same way whiteness erases identity for white people, right? Because it is a construct, because it is no longer about you. I'm gonna say Caitlin because I can see your face. It's no longer about you, Caitlin, at the table helping me, Rhie, who needs support and resources. It's now you, Caitlin, at the table being a representative of a system that has actively harmed me my entire life. And so when I come to you and need help, the vulnerability in the stepping up to the table in the first place has to be honored. We have to be able to interact with our clients and with folks. And this applies to any positionality to power, right? So if you're Jim Ward and you are the executive director of the Balance of State of the THN, I don't know how that all works. I probably should have done better research. I'm sorry I didn't. But you're Jim Ward and you're the executive director of the Texas Homeless Network. And somebody, let's say you're Craig, who works under Jim, and Craig has to come to Jim and say, Jim, you fucked this up, dude. This is not okay. But Craig doing that is an act of bravery on his part because Jim holds power over him, right? Whether Jim is a person who would use it that way or not doesn't matter. I don't know. Craig doesn't know. We don't know. Caitlin, you might be the dopest person in the world who's going to have my back, who's going to like walk me through the shit I need walked through, who's going to hear me as a whole human being. But I am not going to know that when I sit across that table from you for the first, third, or 15th time. Because while I'm sitting across that table from you, your job is to be showing me that you are dope as fuck, that you can be trusted, that you can show up as a whole person, that you aren't going to continue this systemic harm that you are representative of, whether you mean to be or not, right?
I mean, I am pretty dope, so.
I can tell. I would be friends with you. I can like I was looking at you going, dang, we ain't got nobody in Spokane that's like me or Caitlin, and I need to go back to Texas because like Spokane is rough, y'all. Listen, I moved to the Texas of the blues. I went from the blue dot in the red state to the red dot in the blue state. Go figure. I don't know how that happened. But so when we talk about what does it mean, right, to sit at the other side of the table as that person who holds power in the dynamic, whether you want to or not, right? You also hold all of these identities and they matter, right? They matter. What you're like they do, it's okay, they're allowed to, right? Acknowledging, yes, Jess, they have to trust me and allow me to trust them. Right. Yes, we're going to touch on that in a second. Allow me to trust them part. But so when we're talking through, yes, come through, Emilio. Working under some professionals who want to fix people makes it very difficult to help those people. That is, I'm gonna, Tanya, I promise we're gonna move over to this exercise in a second, but I want to touch on that. Saviorism, okay? Saviorism is a very real thing. I've had to challenge internally myself around where are my lines of I'm being a martyr and a savior and I'm doing what I can to help and support folks that I care about, right? That I want to see a better world and I'm going to do what I can. We have to challenge that in ourselves. We're not here to be saviors. You're not here to save me, right? Solidarity, not charity. Amy, why am I not back in Texas? I need to be friends with all of y'all. Listen, all y'all need to send me an email. Let's get on a Zoom call. We're going to have coffee and we just, yes, solidarity, not charity. What does it mean to provide someone, offer someone resources they need and back off and let them decide what they're going to do with that resource? What does that look like? And not have an opinion on it, right? Like what does it look like to trust someone to be able to make a decision for themselves? Because listen, we got here somehow. I didn't get here because I'm stupid, you know? Like, I'm not still alive because I can't figure shit out on my own. You know what I'm saying? The issue, I hate the term empowerment. I hated it when I did youth work. I hate it. I'm going to tell you why. Empowerment indicates that you are giving somebody power. And the shift and cultural shift that we need to see in our work is that the people we walk alongside have all of the power that they need. They have power. What they don't have is people getting out of the way for them to like live into their power, right? What they don't have is space and systems and structures that honor and like want to celebrate that power, because we come under a system, we have a historical system of I mean, I was going to try not to use this term as much as possible, but listen, we have historical systems of white supremacy. That is real. Data backs it up. If you're struggling hearing me say that, that's okay. If you need the data to back it up, I got you. But these are systems, and we're going to talk about it in a little bit, right? Part of what those systems do is they kill spirit, right? They stamp out your spirit. When I was telling you that story about how I got triggered by that lady saying toilets and vomit, the key to this is, and the key to the concept of subculture is, what it cost me to get where I am today was my humanity, right? What I have had to learn to do since I got off the street, and what I've had to like go to therapy for, thankfully had access to be able to do that, was to learn how to see myself again as a human. Because our culture does not see people experiencing homelessness as like humans. And what it does to your brain when you can't recognize yourself as a human is, you don't know that you're allowed to have needs. You don't know that you're allowed to ask for and expect the things that you know everybody else has a right to, but you in your own body don't connect to that. Because what being dehumanized for extended periods of time will do to your body is it will shut you down, right? And so part of our work is to like offer spaces of humanity. And like, that sounds like ethereal and crazy and weird and hard. And I'm going to tell you that like, if you're going to sit through this training, come to the next one, because I'm going to tell you the next one's going to talk through the steps on what you need to do, what you can do. There is no one right way to do any of this. The tagline for my business is, there's no one right way. Like, ending homelessness does not have a one size fits all solution. I am not giving you a tool off the shelf. I'm giving you an approach. We cannot standardize tools. We have to standardize methods, because this work has to be responsive to our community and where we are in our community and where people experiencing homelessness are in our community, and what they are telling us is wrong, right? We don't standardize the tool, we standardize the approach, and the approach is curiosity, right? So this has got me, I got off, listen, I'm bad about this, I'm sorry. The intersecting identities piece is what we need to be talking about. And I think we've been, it's tangential, it happens. This is gonna happen. I hope you guys like can stick with me. And if you get bored, somebody like throw a hand up and let me know, because I will break, because I don't want anybody to be bored. Like, you know, it's a 4-hour training that you signed up for, but still it's in Zoom, it's 4 hours. What, you know, you're like, oh, listen, I'm trying to make it as fun as I can is the point. That said, when we think about our identities, we have to think about the impact that our own identities have on us at the table, right? Because you are going to sit there and be like, you don't get to talk to me like this. Excuse me. You don't get to act like this. Like, what do you think you're doing right now? Like, if I was at home right now, you begin like, we'd be throwing bows. Like, what are you doing? You know? And the overarching point of that, right, is that the role that you carry means you've got to hold some kind of like space for people to have feelings and for people to like act out and for people to be angry. You don't allow yourself to be abused, ever allow yourself to be abused. And if that's happening, set that boundary. Part of what you're doing in your work with people is also modeling healthy boundaries, modeling what it looks like to have relationships where a person says, no, and they come back the next day or they come back later, right? And so don't let yourself be abused, but understand that these identities that you hold, so does the person across the table from you, right? And they mean something. And what we want to dig into in the next 30 minutes or so, and I'm going to pass this over to Tanya, is yes, does everyone have, thank you, Tanya, you are on it. See, I just started, like, I need you to interrupt. Like, we gonna have to work this out, because you're gonna need to cut me off sometimes, be like, Rhie, I love you, but because that's, you know, I can hear that. But do you have something to write on? If you do not, please take the next 30 seconds to grab a post-it note. No, you're going to need like a notebook. a printer paper, a pen, something, because we're going to move into a thing and we need you to have something to write on and something to write with. Some of this you'll be able to do. I'm be quiet. Tanya, go ahead, boo. You got this. Oh, no. Dang. Oh, you my girl. I love you. These are my slides, y'all. What's happening? I got real passionate about what I was talking about. Apologies. We're gonna
good, girl, you good. Preach, preach. But hey, get that pen and paper, by the way.
get that pen and paper while I'm telling you about what we're about to do. So we're gonna do this activity. This is ridiculous, y'all. We're going to do this activity that is adapted from, and this is adapted for use by the program on intergroup relations and the Spectrum Center at the University of Michigan. So what this is a social identity wheel. And we are not going to do a wheel because we can't do a wheel because I'm not in person with you to hand you out sheets of paper, which is why I'm asking you to grab a pen and paper. But what we're going to do, right, the social identity wheel is really trying to encourage you to reflect on like, what are the identities that you hold and like how those identities impact the way that others treat you and the way that you treat others, right? And so what we'll do is, because we don't have this wheel, but you can see on the wheel all the things, right? We've got ethnicity, socioeconomic status, gender, sex, sexual orientation, national origin, first language, physical, emotional, developmental disability or ability, age, religious or spiritual affiliation, race. All of these things are social groups that we're a part of, and they're part of our identity, right? And so this activity, again, typically would be done in a wheel, but it's not going to be. And Tanya, if you want to jump in here and talk through what we're about to do next, I can move that slide over.
Yeah, can you give me a minute? I was taking a little note of those questions.
Oh, I got you. Okay. You guys are just seeing the whole social identity wheel on your screen right now, right? You're not seeing my other screen? Okay. All my notes are on my other screen. They're supposed to be keeping me like reined in, but apparently, you know, people always want me for this because I don't know how not to be authentic, but sometimes that means I get off on tangents.
Craig.
So yeah, we want you guys to really consider how your identity, consider your identity critically, right? And how they're felt in different situations. We want to think about how privilege shows up in this, because that is a real thing. Whether, like, the thing about privilege is it's not something you did. If you are occupying like proximity to privilege, it's not because you created it. You didn't build a historical system that's 400 years old. You, however, do benefit from that system. And that's one of the big struggles, right? When we get into that kind of conversation around race, is that you are allowed to acknowledge the benefit of that system and recognize that you are also harmed by that system, because that is what the identity wheel is all about, right? Because you could be white, you could be a man, you could be straight, you could also be really, really poor. And that means something in this country. Poverty is a thing that you can't talk about race and not talk about class, right? Those two things go hand in hand because of how our systems are designed. And so when we're doing this, we're really asking you to look at the ways in which the different identities you occupy, how do they show up in your world? How do they allow you access to privilege, or how do they create further marginalization that you battle through every day? Because I promise you, when you do this, you will have some of all identity in that. Every one of you will have ways in which you have privilege and ways in which you don't. Every single person when you go through this. So I'm going to put us over to the next slide, Tanya, and you're going to tell folks what they need to write down. I missed a couple.
You did. Okay, so are we going to go into the Jamboard?
We are. I need Craig to put the Jamboard in the chat box for me.
Okay, so if you guys will follow that link, we're going to go into a Jamboard. It will it will pull up this slide. If you will look on the left hand side, there's a little note. You see where Rhie has got her thing. You can type whatever you want there and it will show for everyone.
It is anonymous.
And it is anonymous.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rhie. So if you guys would like to put in some answers to these social identities that you identify with. What I would like you guys to think about is the identities that you think about the most, the identities that you think about the least. Excuse me. Your own identities that you want to learn more about, and how they have a strong effect on you. How your identities have the greatest effect, or your identities that have the greatest effect on how others perceive you.
Yes, and we're gonna play some music. And go ahead.
And if you don't want to put it on the Jamboard, or if you also want to write it on your paper, that's fine as well.
And also, y'all, there's like 80 people here, so you may not, like, it's cool if you think it's covered up or whatever. The idea is for you to be thinking about these things. I just want to throw that out there, Tanya. I'm sorry, because it's
good.
that's gonna happen.
Identities. I don't want to do the identity.
And then we're gonna play music for 5 minutes and give y'all some time to sit with these questions.
Or out of my ears for a second.
I'm gonna mute this person. I don't want to be
I was
rude.
gonna move there, but I
So
really
yeah,
don't
if you're
know
looking
how
at
to
the
do it
big
better.
screen, I'm not doing it right. Okay. If you're looking at the big screen that I'm on, you'll see me hovering on the left sticky note right here, just for those refresher course, for those who didn't get it. And then I'm gonna hit play on some music, and we're gonna take about 4 more minutes on this. Can y'all hear it?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Thank you. Sorry. Somebody put not vampire pale and that made me laugh. All right, it's slowing down. I'm gonna pop us back over to the slide deck. Or do you want to stay here for a second while we reflect, Tanya?
I'm sorry, I was answering.
You all right, Boo?
Let me find, I can't find it. There it is. I couldn't find the meeting. I'm good popping back in. It looks like there are no more answers coming in. So, does anybody want to talk about their answers? Or do we want to go into the discussion, the debrief questions?
I think debrief is the way to go
Okay,
because it'll give space for everybody to answer the questions. I am going to leave this up. So if you'll read the debrief questions out and I'll drop them in the chat box, we can go to that slide here in a second.
okay.
Okay. Oh, my computer crashed. Am I still there?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay,
yeah.
cool. That's fine.
Okay, hold on. Let me navigate my
We'll
screen.
ride this out as long as we can.
Oh, here we go. That's slide 11, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah, it was up. Okay, so what I did, so some of the questions I kind of asked before, what identities have the strongest effect on how you perceive yourself? Would anybody like to answer that in the chat or come off mute and tell us?
I'll go.
Thanks, Caitlin.
To me, one of the ones that I feel I makes up a big part of my identity personally is gender. Because a lot of that is how I want to be perceived by other people. Being non-binary is I don't, it's like I don't consider myself either female or male, and I don't want to be perceived as either. So that's just, I don't know. It's like that's a big thing for me.
So can I ask a follow-up question to that?
Yes.
How would you prefer you get that point to people? Would you prefer people ask you directly when they meet you, like what are your preferred pronouns? Or
Honestly, while gender to me is something that I guess is important, it also, gender is made up to me. Like it doesn't mean anything, but I just want to come across to people, like pronouns, things like that, is not a big deal to me. I mean, I'd prefer to be called dude, but I myself just want to exude androgyny, or like that I want people to perceive me as like me, not a woman or a man, or I just, yeah, it's a little, it's kind of convoluted, nuanced, but yeah.
no, I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing, Caitlin. Anybody else want to share their thoughts about how their identities have the strongest effect on how you perceive yourself?
There's a few in the chat. I don't know what's going on with my computer, but it's starting to make me mad. But there's a few, and every time somebody puts a new thing in, it pops me back up to the top of the chat, and I gotta scroll back down.
Mine is
Yeah. There's a few in here though. We'll see somebody, let's see, we've got ethnicity and national origin, first language, um, person instead of a label, ethnicity, race, and sexual orientation. Height was named in here. Race has been named a few times. Seeing a person before a label. We have, I'm simple. I'll respect anyone until they give me a reason not to. Yeah, so those are just a few things. Is anybody comfortable like coming off and talking through anything they've put in there? And of course you don't have to. I definitely saw somebody else put identifying as a person in recovery before other identities, and it's not on the list. And that's a good point. It's not.
Can I say one more thing?
Of course.
I think race, that's an interesting thing, because being white is that privilege where you don't have to feel like that's the first thing people see.
Mhm.
So that's, I mean, we were talking about privilege earlier. That's a big white privilege right there, is just people don't first, when they look at you, they don't just see, oh, you're black, or you're like in society, it's almost like that's the default, and that's so
Yep.
messed up,
Oh, I'm so glad you said that, because we're going to be talking about that after our break today. That is so true.
Yes.
And I'm somebody who's mixed, I'm the child of I'm first generation to the country. My father like literally came here, didn't speak English the first year that he lived here. He went to college and taught himself English at Blinn, actually. My dad came to go to Texas A&M. That's where my parents met. And he came here, went to Blinn College for a year, didn't speak English and took classes anyway, and then went to A&M
Yes.
and ended up graduating, right? Yeah, it's super cool. And that's where he met my mom and had me. And pre 9/11, I had an accent. I grew up speaking Arabic. I grew up deeply in my culture on my dad's side. Of course, my mom's from Beaumont, right? So I had a lot of culture growing up, but like I grew up very deeply in my dad's culture. Arabic was the first words I spoke were in Arabic. Like I have an accent when I go home and visit my family. I was 18 when 9/11 happened. And when 9/11 happened, I actually credit 9/11 a lot with my homelessness, because I had been kicked out at 17, was allowed back in as long as I was in school or I was working. And that year I was in school at Richland College up in Dallas, and I was living with my mom. Not a healthy relationship or safe space for me to be at that time. I didn't, it was a place to put my head down. So like when I hitchhiked, I basically did college for a semester and then was like, I got to get away from this, and then left, and then went to my dad for college for a semester, had to get away from that, and then left, and then just left entirely. But when I was at Richland, so I'm Arab and my last name is Azzam, and now it's Morris because I married a white man. That's a whole interesting story too about how it's Morris now, but my last name has been Azzam my whole life. And during like right after 9/11, we got like, I would come home, and this was back for you youngsters in the room, back when we had things like yellow book, telephone books, the yellow pages, and we had like answering machines that plugged into the wall and plugged into the phone that plugged into the wall. And I would come home, and there were for days after that getting messages calling me a sand N-word, saying if I left my house I would be murdered. I went to Richland College, and I ended up dropping out of school because I saw people getting I saw these two young men who were Sikhs, and Sikhs are brown. And like oftentimes you'll hear people say that September 12th was the most united this country has ever been, but the reality is it was the most united this country has ever been against brown people, because at the end of the day our country literally is not intelligent enough, mostly the population, to be able to tell the difference between, like, that the first retaliatory murder post 9/11 happened on 9/15, happened in Mesquite, Texas, and it was a Pakistani man who owned a convenience store who was murdered for being an Arab and a terrorist, right? And so like you have to understand that identity is something. I changed my accent. I don't speak Arabic in public at all. The first time my husband ever saw me with my family, with my dad's family, he was like, who are you? And I was like, this is who I've been, but it's not been safe to be, right? I can't be out like this. My little brother was 13. He got beaten up so badly at school that year that he had to leave that semester, he was hospitalized and couldn't go back to school that semester. I saw two young Sikh men who are not Arab, but who are brown, and they are people who wear their hair wrapped up, and they let their hair grow out of a religious reason, get beat up at school at Richland College badly, got jumped by a pack of boys and of white boys. And I saw three professors walk by. One of them was one of my teachers. And this was like in the center of the quad at Richland. I saw these professors walk by and they didn't do anything. And I went home and I told my mom, like, I'm not safe anymore. Like, my best friend and I, her dad is from Iran. We were both, again, first generation children, having conversations at the age of 18 about what happens when they do internment camps. My white grandfather, who raised me, who I love, who gave me a love of literature, a love of poetry, a love of language, which is like how I survived as a street kid, was doing spoken word. And that year at Thanksgiving, I was at my grandparents' house and he said, I fully support internment camps for Arab Americans. And I was like, that's me, right? That's me and my dad and my siblings, who at the time were like 13, like 6 and 2. And my grandfather, who helped raise me, looked me in my face and said, you have to sacrifice some of the innocents for the good of the nation. And I started to cry. And he came to me the next day and said he didn't understand how messed up it was, that what he believed, and he was so sorry. But you have to understand, right? Y'all see me right now. I'm a white woman. You wouldn't know that any of that is in my history at all if I didn't share it with you. You know what I'm saying? Like, you wouldn't know that that's a part of what I carry every day in my life. That like my white husband's family is super racist, and like his grandmother is 104 when she found out I was Arab, started referring to Arabs exclusively as terrorists. His dad told me that I looked white, so that was good enough for him for us to have babies. Like, I live with this daily. You wouldn't know that to look at me. And that's kind of the point of this exercise, right? What identities have the strongest effect on how you perceive yourself? What are the things that are real, right? And then, like, I'm going to pass this back over to you, Tanya, because I do think we need to talk about also these other two questions, and I'm going to stay quiet for them.
That's okay, Rhie. You have some really powerful things to say. So thank you for sharing that with all of us. I got chills multiple times in that. So let's move on to the next question. What identities have the greatest effect on how others perceive you? Does anybody want to come off mute and answer that?
I don't want to like take up everybody's talking time because but I think one is just being a tattooed person. That's what people see first, and there's judgment, obviously.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you, Caitlin. Would anybody else like to share how their identities have an effect on how others perceive you?
I feel like this is kind of a hard one to answer, because I think a lot of it also is determined based on the other person's perception of your identity. Because the answer to that has definitely changed for me throughout my life, and also changes for me dependent on who I'm speaking with or who I'm with when I'm speaking to them. So I guess I don't have an answer. My answer is just that I don't think it is really our identities that are determining that answer.
And I believe what Kaylin said there, because I came from small town Johnson City Country, Texas. So when I talk to those town folks, I'm going to use my straight voice. I'm going to go real low, real straight. But when I come back to Austin, hey boo, let's do it. Let's pop it up. But I've learned to put those masks on in a situation to either fit in or hide in the background.
Me, you guys hear me on my book? With me, I work with children, and I've been a big guy since I was 5 years old. I've been just a giant to a kid, and when I walk into a room, my size immediately like puts people back. school, being a male in school, I'm automatically looked at like I'm a threat, because it's a female dominated field, and so there's a guy in there that like something's wrong, and I'm a coordinator, but still I'm looked at differently because of that.
This is Sonia. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Sonia.
I am from Mexico. I'm a little bit on the dark skin. A lot of people think I'm from India. A lot of people think I'm an indigenous Indian. And when they see me, they always ask, "Oh, do you speak English?" And I'm like, "Yes, I speak English and Spanish and German and French. Which language would you like to communicate in?" But they always
Yes.
immediately assume I'm an indigenous Indian and can't speak English
Wow.
because of how I look.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that.
And that goes back to just the idea that being white is such a privilege that if you're not, race is something that people see first. And yeah.
That actually, thank you, Caitlin, is a really good, oh no, we have to answer the third question. Dang, because that was
Yes.
such a good segue.
It was.
We'll
It
go back to
was indeed. So the final question is, how do identities impact your work? Does anybody want to answer that one?
When I worked in my local community, I was on okay, you know what? I'm gonna just say this, and I think maybe it's being recorded. So sorry to those of you that I love in that community, but and I was on the COC governing council in my community, and I was there for a few months and realized that I could not do that work because whether or not my community saw me this way, the fear in me that all they ever saw was the kid that came in as a street kid, because I worked with so many people who had known me when I was homeless, that it was like I couldn't get past this feeling of like I have to constantly prove myself. I have Facebook memories that literally just came up a couple of days ago that say things like, "I'm a national expert in this work, but in my local work, like these people don't hear me, they don't listen to me, they don't care what I have to say." Like they just see me as somebody who's highly emotional, somebody who's too like this, too like that, doesn't get the system. It's like, bruh, are you joking? I can tear your system down. Like, let's go. Piece by piece, I can break this down for you. Please do not talk to me like I don't know what I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? And that identity piece was part of it. That lived experience was a huge part of it. And another part of it, and I'm going to name this as a thing we don't talk about, I'm in a fat body. Being in a fat body means very often that instantly I am perceived as somebody who's not intelligent, somebody who's like a number of negative things before they even see who I am, right? They see my body first and make an assumption about what I am, who I am, and what I do. And like that impacts how I could show up at I left our council. I literally stepped down because I was like, I can't do this work in this community, because in this community, I don't feel like my expertise and brilliance is being allowed to shine because I don't feel like it's being seen. Conversely, I sit on the board of the Other Ones Foundation now, and in that space, very much feel like what I have to say is heard and validated. That is still in my old community where I was homeless. There are still people that are on that board who have known me throughout my whole journey, but just that shift made such a huge difference in how I could show up at work, right? And so that's me talking too much again. I would really do love to hear though, like how do your identities like impact the way you work? And I'd love it if somebody who's just feeling brave would pop off that mute. Like I see a lot of faces and I see those faces putting stuff in a chat, but not speaking. If you're comfortable speaking, I would love it. And if not, that's okay.
I'll take on the challenge and say something.
Thank you, Ms. Trina.
So unfortunately, first and foremost, people see me as a Black woman. Before I open my mouth, before I say my name, before I say anything. And secondly, it's my gender. People see me as a woman. So when I step in the room or when I step in work, in many of my positions, I've been in leadership positions. And I'm usually, like Stephanie mentioned, I'm the youngest person. And so in work, it's how did you get there? It must be because of affirmative action. How did you get to, how were you able to go to this school? How were you able to get in these environments? Affirmative action definitely played a role in that. And so then you add on to all of that, being the youngest, being a Black woman, being a Black person, a woman, you add that you're from Mississippi and it's, oh, you grew up very illiterate. So how are you going to provide this training for us? And then towards the end, you know, I've had in many conversations at work, oh my goodness, you're so articulate. You're so, you have such a breadth of knowledge. You have such a, and it's so.
Microaggressions.
When you read my resume, when you looked me up, like, did you not? And so I always have to, Black is the first thing people see. A woman is next. And then it's the profilers of your education, being the youngest, how did you get here? Affirmative action, you don't have enough years in the work. Well, just because it took you 10 years, 20 years to learn, and it took me a year, does not mean that I still don't know how to do the work. In fact, I'll run circles around you and I'll give me a few months and you'll see. And so those are the things that I've had to deal with in the work environment. And being the youngest, probably, aside from being Black, being the youngest has probably had the most impact in the workforce, with everyone else being older than me.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ms. Trina. Like, honestly, that part too about, oh, you are so smart. I read I wrote the middle of a poem the other day. It doesn't have a beginning or end. And I read it to one of my colleagues who's a white man. And I work with him all the time. And when I finished reading it, he was like, wow, that, and I had told him before I started to read it that I had written it and I wanted to share it with him. When I finished reading it, he was like, oh my God, that's amazing, Rhie. Who wrote that? Where did you find that? And I was like, well, I told you, well, I wrote it, like I said earlier. I was like, I wrote it. And he was like, you wrote that? And it's just like, damn, dog, really? Like, yeah, I did. You've been working with me for a year and a half. You're not surprised. Like, shit is really frustrating. That's why I'm commiserating with you, Ms. Trina. But yeah, I want to name too all of this that we're talking about right now and the impacts this is having. I want you to think about how your intersecting identities exist and show up and impact and have effect on how you are perceived and how how you perceive the world and yourself and how others perceive you. And then I want you to add not having a home, not having a house, showing up to a space where you know you probably need to do some laundry and haven't been able to in a week. You know it's hot, it's Texas, it's sweaty, and I got to go talk to this person, and what that impact is, right? I see you, Miss Jess, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to add something on the other side of what we were just talking about, on kind of a positive note, that I am a white presenting brown woman, a Sicilian descent, and so I generally am looked at as a white woman, and I get heard like a white woman more so than I do as a brown woman. So that's kind of a privilege of mine that I have, where I'm able to go into certain spaces and talk to people who may not necessarily have positively listened to me to begin with, which I've definitely. But then, add that too. I also am educated. I also am, so motivated, and I'm very, forward seeking in my viewpoints. And so I definitely am lucky to have that privilege of having that perception of other people that is not necessarily mine, but that I take advantage of when I can, for sure. But then, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Jess. And I think that's real, right? Like, how our identities, like how we perceive ourselves versus how we are perceived, how those two things impact our jobs, our work. Are you wanting to still speak, Jess? Because I see you coming off mute. Did I
Well,
cut you off?
no, I just wanted to say one more thing about the you said dad being homeless to that.
Yes.
That's a huge one because all of a sudden that just really changes the viewpoint big time. So kind of
Absolutely.
as a victim that way for some reason.
I see you, Caitlin.
Okay. I think working with people experiencing homelessness, the way I'm perceived actually helps me, especially being tattooed and looking like a gutter punk kid, you know, because that's who I was. And I have that lived experience. And that actually helps me. That helps me connect with people in that way. And as far as coworkers, my team's awesome. Tanya knows, but I totally got off track and forgot what I was saying, but yeah.
No, it's okay. Thank you. I just think it's important, and like, I want to be clear. I hate poverty simulations. I hate these groups that are like, come sleep outside overnight and you'll know what it's like to be homeless. So when I say I want you to consider all of your identities and then add on top of that what it would be to have that like housing insecurity or not have that, I am not asking you to like romanticize or fantasize what it is. I'm asking you to look at the people you work with every day and consider all of the things that you just talked about with us. They are also carrying all of that every single day, and they're carrying the additional dehumanization and stigma of what it means to be homeless, to not have anywhere to put their head down at night, to not, people often think that we're stupid. We're, if again, that bootstraps mentality, and we're carrying that. And I'm going to tell you the truth. If I walked into any one of your offices today in that situation, like I did when I was 19 years old, I would walk in expecting you to think all of those things about me. I would be prepared for that. I would be defensive. There is going to be a wall around me to keep me safe from you. And your job is to show that you see me. And the more you show that you see me, the more I'm able to see you, because I am not able to see you until I know that I am seen. That is all of us, You don't show up to church the same way you show up to the club. We know that, right? I'm not asking you to come be your whole like party ass self, right? What I'm saying is you need to consider, you need to hold in your bodies what it is, all of the things that you feel when we walk through this activity, that your clients and the people you're working with also feel all those things, man. And it's a messy thing. Being human is messy, right? So I see Jess, and I see that Caitlin came off mute. Jess's hand went up first, so I'm going to go with Jess and then Caitlin, and then I am going to move us to the next slide because I want to make sure we get time for our break and stuff.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to touch on the trust issue we talked about earlier briefly about people in the in-house community trusting us more so than us trusting them, or allowing us to trust them, allowing us to go into their space and feel safe and feel comfortable. Just like the trust there is not, it's not one-sided at all. So, the perception can't be one-sided either. It's got to be that they see us and they know us and they hear our voice and they trust us just as much as they, want to be trusted.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm like, yeah, I did hear you. I'm trying to be mindful of time.
And I just wanted to say real quick that part of why I try to look the way I look is because, and you were saying it's like building a wall. It's sort of like a filter. If people don't want to talk to me or connect with me or really get to know me because of how I look, then I don't want to get to know them either in the first place. They're going to be judgmental,
Word, I do. Yes. I know you can't see it, but I literally am covered head to toe in tattoos. They're covered today because I live in a cold climate now. I think also I want to uplift something Sarah put in the chat box, because this is a really powerful thing and I think worth everyone hearing. Sometimes it feels disingenuous to consider how my own identities might negatively impact my life when I consider all the identities I have that are seen as a positive or an advantage in our culture. I think that's so real, right? But I think that's also, you have to honor the wholeness of yourself too, right? You get the same things. What I'm telling you is needed to interact and engage with clients or with folks with lived experience. You deserve all the same things. I'm not telling, like, I want you all to do that work, right? That's just some super deep internal work. That's like not something we go and do in a 4-hour training, right? But you have a right to recognize and honor the ways in which your identities can both negatively and positively impact your life. Now, if you sit on some accesses to privilege, part of your, like, this is how I view it. Part of, like, I have accesses to privilege. My job is to leverage that privilege as much as possible. My job is to hear and take guidance and listen. You know, I do anti-racism work. I've been an anti-racism educator for like 20 years now. All the way from like beating up Nazis in the street when I was in my 20s, because that's what I thought we were supposed to do, to like standing before like rooms like this and teaching on race, which I'm about to do, right? Like the gamut of it, I've done it. I am an anti-racist. I believe anti-racism is an action and not an ideology. And because I believe that anti-racism is an action, part of my job is to basically just offer up my accesses to power and privilege and like leverage it as much as possible. What can I be doing? Because the thing that we're doing that no one wants to say and we need to say is that we are dismantling a system that is working the way it is designed to work. And at the same time, we are rebuilding a new one. And that's a lot of work. And that's a lot of internal work we have to do, because the systems impact us as much as they impact there is no escape from the water we swim in, right? So what we're doing is we are dismantling and rebuilding simultaneously. You will often hear me say, I do not want a seat at your table. I want to build a new table. This table does not serve me. This table does not work for me. This table does not serve Black and brown people in our country. This table and in fact, the table we all clamoring to sit at was built on our backs. You know what I'm saying? And so it's time for a new table. And part of that new table is literally going all the way drilling down into, how do I see myself? What are the identities that I carry? That's a part of it, right? It's living in the micro to shift the macro. That's what we're trying to do, right? So that is going to lead us into, I love it. Sydney, I don't know where you came from, but let's be friends. I love it. Now that we've done this though, and we've talked about our identities, we've talked about that, one thing we heard a lot, and we heard from Ms. Trina most recently, right, is around race. And that's something we can't not talk about, right? We cannot ignore the, I don't know, what's a phrase for it? Elephant in the room, is that something people say? I don't know. But like, look at this kitten. Look, I can't. Did I start off by announcing as one of my identities that I have ADHD? Because I do. And that kitten was real cute. Let me back up because we were talking about something. I apologize actually for that derailment. When we're talking about our work, race is intrinsically linked into the work that we're doing. You know, there's no way around it. Studies have come out and shown, and we know there's evidence. So for those of you who need that data, let me know and I'll pull the study and send it to you. I don't have it on my slide, but I will send it to you. We know, for example, that Black and African-American people in the United States make up, the general population is around 13%. We also know through the data we're able to collect that of people experiencing homelessness in the United States, 42% of them are Black and African-American. That is a massive disparity. And we see that disparity because I do this work across the country. We see that disparity like mimicked, right, in each community. You know what I'm saying? Like in the race equity for coordinated entry, like the thing I kept trying to tell them is we're not selling you a tool, we're selling you a methodology. You can't use an off-the-shelf tool because what worked in Austin is not going to work in Beaumont. What worked in Dallas is not going to work in Harlingen. That's a reality. Harlingen and Beaumont and Dallas and Austin got to figure out their own shit and answer those questions for themselves, right? And that is the reality of our work. We can't ignore race as a factor in perception, because we literally had half of this room say, when asked what identities have the greatest effect on how others perceive you, half of the room said race, right? We can't act like it's not real. We know in Austin, Texas, and I know, again, Austin is not, Lubbock or Abilene or Alvin, right? Austin, I know that, but numbers are similar across the state, right? And in the city of Austin, we know that less than 10% of the population of the city of Austin is Black, because there's a flight right now, right? They're getting pushed, folks are getting pushed out. That's what's happening. Less than 10% of the population in the city of Austin is Black, and last count was 41.6% of people experiencing homelessness in the city of Austin are Black. 86% of people experiencing homelessness in the city of Austin are people of color. We disaggregated our data by ethnicity, because if you are Hispanic or Latinx, you often will mark white as your race, right? Because the question is white non-Hispanic or white Hispanic. So we had to disaggregate that data to get a real number of like how many people of color are experiencing homelessness. 86% of people in the city of Austin who are experiencing homelessness are people of color. And like almost 42% of them are Black folks, right? That's a reality in every one of our communities. And we need to talk about how the history of like structural racism has gotten us to this point. And to do that, I'm gonna stop talking and we're gonna spend 4 minutes. Hopefully you can hear watching a video that is really dope, that's gonna talk to you a lot about structural racism. And then we're gonna come back and ask a question, and then we're gonna wrap that for a break. So if y'all can stick it out for another, let's give it 15 minutes, then we'll take a 15-minute break at 10 after the hour. Is that good for everybody? I mean, it's gonna have to be it, I guess. But let me hit play. Can y'all hear this?
Like many songs will tell you,
bullet holes left in my peak holes.
the story of what housing and other living conditions look like for many Black Americans is pretty bleak, and that's by design. In addition to artists cataloging their very personal experiences, it's been proven that the modern phenomenon of concentrated Black poverty was an intentional government-sponsored institution. This is in part why President Biden issued an executive order back in January, intended to right the historical wrongs Black folks have faced when it comes to housing and home ownership in this country. But first, let's take it back.
The dawn of the 20th century, African Americans in major cities lived scattered throughout the city. They weren't segregated particularly. It's only with the Great Migration of 6 to 7 million African Americans north and west escaping the South, the predominant response of the United States government and state and local governments to the Great Migration was to contain Black people in their own neighborhoods. And HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, was particularly a part of this role. But the precursors to HUD introduced and encouraged racially restrictive covenants, redlining of every major city where African Americans landed. The federal government was a sponsor of urban renewal, infamously called Negro removal by the great James Baldwin.
Urban renewal, which means moving the Negroes out. It means Negro removal. That is what it means. And the federal government is an accomplice to this fact.
That so-called urban renewal also included a federally sponsored interstate highway system, which was intentionally designed to mow through vibrant Black neighborhoods. Take Miami, for example. 2 highways, I-95 and I-395, bulldoze right through the predominantly Black and low-income Overtown neighborhood, previously called Colored Town during segregation.
The Department of Housing and Urban Development and the federal government writ large in the first 7 decades of the 20th century invested billions of dollars in racial segregation and concentrated poverty. Each time this country created a peculiar institution that subordinated Black people, slavery, Jim Crow, it created and dismantled it. They replaced it with another one. And the iconic Black ghetto, I don't use that as a pejorative, I use it as a descriptor, was a follow-on institution to slavery and Jim Crow. That's the legacy that every new administration inherits, and the Biden administration has as well.
Today, I'm directing the Department of Housing and Urban Affairs and Urban Development to redress historical racism in federal housing policies.
This executive order is just one of 4 signed by President Biden, designed to address racial equity in the United States. And while this progress is a step in the right direction, there's still a lot of harm to undo.
Segregation started coming down after the passage of the Fair Housing Act of 1968, which actually only got passed in the wake of Dr. Martin Luther King's assassination. In 1980, 8 out of 10 Black people would have had to move in order to be evenly integrated within metropolitan areas. Half of Black people who live in metropolitan areas still live in neighborhoods of high segregation. So we've had modest improvement, but segregation persists. And economic segregation has spiked since 1970. The so-called American dream is only working for a relatively small slice of the population that can afford to buy their way into what I call gold standard neighborhoods that have the best of everything. And everybody else struggles, and the Black poor struggle the most.
I was muted. That was a lot what we just heard, you know, and a damnation in a lot of ways of systems that we work for. I mean, you know, I'm a HUD PA. It just broke my computer. But what are y'all looking at right now?
It's the
Seeing your slide with the video.
Yeah, slide with the video.
Thank you. I don't know what's going on with my machine, but it's not being friendly to me today. But yeah, what we just saw, right? What are y'all familiar with the concepts of redlining? Do y'all know what that means when they say redlining? So historically, when cities were developed, and in fact, it's up on my ceiling. I don't know if you can look at it, but I'll try to show you. But if you look up there, that white document up top, so that's actually Tulsa, Oklahoma, and that is Black Wall Street. And so historically, what was written into housing policy in the United States federally were policies that allowed for the act of redlining. So they would take a map of a community and they would find the places that were like the least desirable places to live. You'll find that Black and Brown communities are on the east side. That is because most often they would be downwind of the industry, and that's why the industrial area, right? So all that gross stuff that's in the air, they would build those neighborhoods there intentionally. And so they had, in every city, they would find the least desirable places, and then that would be the only place that Black folks would be allowed to get loans for. Right. So if they were going to try to buy a home, this was where they were allowed to purchase homes. In places like where I live in Washington and Oregon was like the worst about it. They and really everywhere they had the racial the covenants, right? Neighborhood covenants that would say that Black people can't live here. They're not allowed to buy homes here. And this was, again, federally supported. The policies around redlining came from our government in the, I want to say in the 30s. It might have been earlier than that. And you can look at places like Austin, for example. Austin was not segregated until the infamous city plan of 1928. And the city of Austin brought in people from Chicago to help do the strategic plan. And at that point, you know, Austin was a place where there were originally around 13 what they call like freedmen's communities there because of the water, because of Waterloo, which is now Town Lake. No, it's not Town Lake anymore. It's something else. It's Town Lake. We're not going to go with it. She didn't want it called that. But anyway, because of access to water. So one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Austin is called Clarksville. No, it's not. It's called Tarrytown. But it used to be called Clarksville because it used to be a place that Black folks lived. We had one of the largest freedmen towns in the state of Texas with like full, like multiple churches and schools, banks, grocery stores and everything. And what happened was after that plan came out in 1928, the city basically said, If you don't move to this area, which was on the east side of what they called East Avenue, which then later became where they built I-35, like they were talking about that interstate system, right? So east of East Avenue was a mostly Latinx and Hispanic community at that time. And what they did is they cut off access to water, to sewer, and to trash if people refused to move. They relocated over the course of a decade 10,000 people to the east side of Austin. And so what happened was you had between I believe it's I'm gonna be wrong on this, but I think it's 11th Street north to MLK became like the Black area, the Negro area, and then from 11th Street south to the river was the Latinx area. And they prior had not had segregated trolleys. They segregated public transportation at that point. And to this day, when they did their big like overhaul of public transportation, they cut mostly lines that run east to west to get people into town, right? From the east side to go to work. But they didn't cut the north-south lines because that's the ones the students all ride to get up to the university. So these are things that are still happening, that we still see this everywhere, right? This is inescapable. And it impacts the way, hey, Jim Ward come through with that Clarksville. That's awesome. Y'all go check out that link. It's dope. Thank you for that, Jim. So to this day, though, we see this impact of like systemic racism that is happening. And again, I want to tell you, I'm going to say this over and over and over and over again. When you sit on the other side of this desk, you are representative of this system. It sucks. You don't want to be. Fuck the system. It's a horrible system. It's also working exactly how it was designed to work. So when we say we're trying to fix a broken system, we're not. We're not trying to fix a broken system. I'm not here teaching y'all on how to fix a broken system. I'm here saying this is how you tear that system down and build something new. And honestly, it doesn't maybe feel this way right now, but it does start first with that interrogation of identity and how that identity is showing up in the room with the person that you're walking alongside, right? How their identity is showing up in the room with you. And so after this, we have, oh yeah, that's great. Color of Law is one of my favorite books. We have a debrief question, and then technically we were going to go into another thing and then go to break in a minute, but I think we need to go to break. So let's spend about 4 minutes on this and then we'll I'm sorry, it's playing. I told you I was having computer issues. So this is you, Miss Tanya.
All right, so guys, you can drop your answer in the chat or feel free to come off mute. We would really appreciate some discussion.
No, we're chatter falling.
Oh, are we? No, that's implicit bias.
We added it to this one.
Oh, we did. Okay. Then excuse me. After I ask this question, I'm going to have everyone put their answers into the chat, but do not press enter. I'm going to give you guys 1 minute to enter them into the chat. And when I say enter, then everyone is going to enter their answers at the same time. So the question is, how does this impact your work, right? And we're talking in regards to race. How does the race how does it impact your work, the intersectionality of race and social class?
I'm hitting start. Don't hit enter until you hear my little phone go dee 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 dee. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh no, then I guess I can't play music. So we're gonna sit here silently while you answer this, because otherwise you won't hear my dee 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 dee. Silence is uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'm kind of weird with silence too.
30 seconds, friends. No, please, Craig, don't do that. 15 seconds. It's very kind of you to offer, though.
Same, Caitlin, same.
All right, hit enter.
Oh, boy.
All right, I'm gonna have to wait because I'm having all these, I don't know what's going on with my laptop.
Yeah, my chat box was being weird earlier. But it seems to work better when I just go full screen on the chat box.
There's so many good answers in here. All right, so I'm rolling through these answers. Access to resources, affordable housing, perceived disconnect among staff and residents. I want to hear more about the use of the term perceived disconnect. Heather, are you comfortable to come off mute and talk a little more about that? It's okay if not. I won't be mad.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I had to undo the video. So I think it kind of goes to a concept that I actually studied when I was in school, kind of self-segregation, and how even as bridges are, as we try and cross bridges to try and address issues, whether it's within the team or it's across, you know, our staff versus our residents, this perception from management, as we ask for, hey, input, hey, I need, you know, I need to know what to do, but there's no connection there, and not being sure if it's because of distrust or if it's just uncomfortable not giving feedback. So it kind of creates this, what is it, right? Am I being biased and I don't realize it? Or is it like legit, like there's really nothing to worry about and like I'm the lowest priority in their list of 500 things to do? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It does.
Okay.
It does. Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
And that's a really real part of our work too, right? That's part of that, you know, you keep hearing me say the term like interrogating and like, we have to like do this self-work, but that is what we have to, that is a part of what we have to do, you know? It makes us better at our work. It makes our work environments better. And our work environments have to sign on for this too. You know what I mean? Like there's only so much you can do if the culture of the place you work is not on board for this. And so then it becomes, how do we advocate? How do we advocate up, gatekeep up, right? And do it in ways where that's, again, leveraging that access and proximity to power and privilege. I want to read a couple of more in here. It's extremely difficult to tear down barriers. That's real. It makes me more aware that people I'm trying to help may associate me with the system, even if I don't agree with the system, and that can cause a barrier to the rapport. Absolutely. I think this goes back to making sure people feel heard and understood. I want the people I'm walking alongside to know that I know the uphill climb they've had because of their race and how I want to help them overcome the obstacles in their way. That's interesting. I like that. I like that. I also like, because I am white, I've never experienced racism on a personal level, which means that while I can sympathize and empathize, I will never really understand it. I think, Sarah, like you have hit a big nail on the head, right? It is okay for y'all to not get it. You don't have to get it to know it's true, because you have to know that you don't dictate someone else's experience, right? So if you don't understand it, like if I come to Jim, I'm using you as an example, Jim. If I come to Jim and I'm like, dude, you're being like a racist asshole. And Jim is like, I didn't, what are you talking about? I don't understand. Why do you feel this way? What have I done? Like there's nothing he can say to me that's going to change my experience of him in that way, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? All he can do in that moment is say, Rhie, can you tell me more about what you're talking about? I don't understand. Because I used a very broad, like, you're a racist asshole. That's not a really good feedback example. But that's something you probably may hear from people clients that you're walking alongside one day who's angry. And so the thing is you go like, tell me more about why you're feeling that way. And you don't challenge what people are feeling. You don't get to tell somebody else what their experience is. You don't get to tell me in a position of no power that my experience of you with all the power is wrong, you know? And that feels icky in our bodies, because what that means is we have to accept to some extent. Jim is going to have to. We duel it out, and I tell him why I think what he did was racist. He's going to have to deal with and process through on his own, with his own community, with his own humans, his own people, not with me because I don't have any power, right? But like, he's going to need to process through like, shit, like it feels really bad when somebody tells me I did something that hurt them. But when someone tells me I did something that hurt them, I do not get to tell them that they're wrong. And that's the thing that our defensiveness comes up so quick. We're going to talk about that in a minute. We need to go to a break. But yeah, so I think there's no way that we can ignore the impacts, right, of identity, intersecting identities and race in how we navigate and move through our work. And so I'm going to close this out with this before we go to break, right? We know that race is the leading predictor of outcomes along social determinants of health, all 5 of them. We know that, right? Including housing. And we have to recognize intersectionality and lead with racial equity, that we ensure that Black, Indigenous, and all people of color are not left behind. And one of the things that we can do, and it's imperative to do, is to have this ongoing intersectional analysis of our interplay. It's exhausting. Let me just tell you, it's exhausting. Being a human is a lot of work. Like, no lie, humans are messy, but we have to keep that ongoing analysis as a part of something in the back of our minds, challenging how identities show up, how race shows up, what this means when we are faced with outcomes of historical trauma. How do we navigate those spaces? And that's a part of what we're doing every single day. So with that said, at exactly 1:15, oh, I hate that Caitlin has to leave. At exactly 1:15, we're going to break for 15 minutes. Please come back at the 30-minute mark. I'm going to leave. I never changed the slides. I messed this up. This was the slide y'all were supposed to be looking at. My bad. I'm going to leave us with some music playing, and we're going to come back at 1:15. And I'm going to tell anybody who's trying to private message me, I am going to smoke a cigarette. Oh, it's 3:30 y'all's time. See,
Yep,
look.
3:30 Central.
Yeah, we're gonna come back at 3:30 on the nose. Please be here, and then we're gonna jump back in and get through this content. And I'm gonna go smoke. So if you're messaging me, I'm not gonna see it. I'm just telling you right now. All right, we'll be back.
We'll be back.
Oh, I was muted. Hello. How are we doing? Are we back?
We're back.
Yes, we're back.
We're back.
Hold on, I'm trying to get back in full screen. So I can see what I'm doing. Oof.
So we're back. Everybody's back. Everybody's
There we
good.
go.
Can I get some, like, I don't know, drop a period in the chat or throw a thumbs up, hands up, just see who else back with us. Awesome. Seeing folks showing up. Yes. Perfect. Just enough time to grab a milkshake. I love it. All right, solid. Cool. Well, welcome back, everybody. So I want to talk about a thing. What's the reality of where we're at is we're not going to get to the conversation around trauma this afternoon, and that's okay, because actually it'll fit really well in session 2, where we're going to talk about how we operationalize all of these conversations. And the truth is, we've been discussing trauma throughout this whole session. Really, we've been discussing the ways in which trauma shows up, how it is influenced in our identities, how it is influenced in by our identities, and how it shows up in our work, not just for us, or not just for our clients, but also for us, right? So we will talk more about that in the second session. And just so you know, the second session really is going to be about, like, so we've talked about these big kind of conceptual ideas today. What do we do with that at work, right? And so that's what we're going to work through and kind of do more practical work around in our follow-up session to this on the 28th. So if you can, please be here for that, because those who missed this session may be slightly lost when we get into that session, but I'm hoping that we can tie it all together. So, oh, it's been a lot. I would love a sweet little check-in with everybody. If anybody wants to come off mute or drop in the chat, like, how are y'all feeling and how are we doing? And just like let's do a little check-in with each other really quickly.
Still alive?
Hey, sometimes that's all we can ask for, you know. Rainy and icky and tired. Yeah, that's real. Thank you, Heather. I'm going to ask, before we jump into implicit bias, let's do a quick little breathing exercise together now that we've had a little break. We've gotten a chance to grab, get our second cup of tea or coffee or whatever. So what I'm going to ask us all to do together, excuse me, is my chat is really, like, just thrown off, and that's throwing me off, and I'm sorry for that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ignore the chat box. We're going to take 3 deep breaths together. And when we take these 3 deep breaths, what we're going to do is we're going to inhale through our nose on a 4 count. We're going to hold in our breath for a 4 count, and then we're going to exhale for a 6 count. And that's really important that we do that. And I will count us out, so you'll follow my lead. We're going to do that 3 times. You can put your feet on the ground if that's a thing, you know, to get yourself a little grounded, or snuggle down into your chair. I'm in an office chair, so it's not quite that exciting. But just get yourselves a little relaxed, and then eyes open, eyes closed, doesn't matter. But I do ask that you please do this with me. So again, we're going to go in on a 4, hold on a 4, out on a 6. Okay. And I'm going to start us off. So we're going to go in, hold, out, in, hold, out. One more time. In, hold, out. All right. Wiggle a little. That's actually something you can do when there's, like, high stress situations going on. If there's the potential for everybody to take a breath together, it can really help, and it helps our bodies realign with where we are. You know, we're talking a lot about heavy topics today, and it's good for our it's good for us to be able to sit inside of ourselves and be comfortable and safe and okay, and like check back in with our bodies. So I appreciate you all for like humoring me with that. Because I know it's kind of can be a little weird. Like, I'm in a training. Why is this lady asking me to breathe? But breathing really does impact how we can move through our day. So with that, I'm going to talk with you guys a little bit about implicit bias. Is anybody here familiar with that concept? Oh yeah, I can't see faces. This is so hard to do on Zoom, y'all. I feel so like disconnected from people. So implicit bias, right, is the idea that, and there's like studies done about this. This is not just me like talking to you about some fun like radical left nonsense. Like, this is real. Like, our brains, our eyes and our brains take in around, I think it's like 1 million pieces of information every time we look at anything. And we can only like, sorry, I got distracted by the chat box again. We can only actually process a certain number of pieces of information. And because of that, we have a tendency to have biases that are created based on the pieces of information that we can hold in our mind. And we're going to talk a little bit about what implicit bias is. This video is going to talk to you about it more than I am. And then we're going to kind of talk through how implicit bias can show up in our workplace and in the ways in which we engage with our clients, with the folks we're walking alongside, with our colleagues. So we're going to spend 2 minutes having this awesome video explain implicit bias way better than I can. And which doesn't mean I don't know my stuff, but you know how Einstein was like, you don't really know something unless you can explain it to a kindergartner. Like, sometimes I feel really insecure because of that, because I'm like, oh, but I understand these things, I just don't know how to talk about them. So I'm gonna let this video do it. And let me hit play.
Implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
2016 was the year that implicit bias went somewhat main.
Can y'all hear that? Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Let me start over because I didn't have my closed captions on. All right.
Implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
2016 was the year that implicit bias went somewhat mainstream.
Yeah, so when Hillary Clinton mentioned implicit bias in the debates, our phones started blowing up, all our friends started emailing us about it.
But what is implicit bias? Implicit biases are basically thought processes that happen without you even knowing it. Little mental shortcuts that hold judgments you might not agree with. And sometimes the shortcuts are based on race. First, some clarity. Saying someone has an implicit bias is different from calling someone a racist.
The word racist is a highly loaded term, right, here in American society. A lot of times, when people are using it, they're thinking of the kind of old-fashioned Ku Klux Klan style racist.
But implicit bias isn't anywhere near that, explicit.
Implicit bias is something that comes out of ordinary mental functioning, out of how the mind normally works.
We've all grown up in a culture with media images, news images, conversations we heard at home, our education. Think of that as a fog we've been breathing our whole life. We never even realized it, what we were taking in.
And that fog causes associations that lead to biases.
I somehow know that if you say peanut butter, I'm going to say jelly. That's an association that's been ingrained in me because throughout my life, peanut butter and jelly are together. And in many forms of media, there's an over-representation of Black men and violent crime being paired together.
And because of that, I actually deep down inside have been taught that Black men are violent and aggressive and not to be trusted, that they're criminals, that they're thugs.
With all those associations, I'm not trying to let us off the hook, but in some ways, none of us stood a chance.
Starting today, we'll post a video a day dealing with one challenge of understanding implicit bias and its relationship to race and exploring ways we might combat the problem. One more thing, if you're seeing this and thinking that it doesn't apply to you, well, you might be falling prey to the blind spot bias. That's the scientific name for a mental bias that allows you to see biases in others, but not in yourself. We're biased.
Guess what? We're biased. Can I tell y'all something before we go to our discussion question? So I teach on anti-racism, right? And I'm super white presenting and have a lot of benefits of access to privilege because of that. I think it's really important to know, like, 25-year anti-racist educator, like, do this work, live and breathe this work. I'm also racist, right? Like, I am also victim or perpetrator of this system and this culture that has raised me. And I have to counter that. When I say anti-racism in action, part of that action is that challenge to myself and that challenging of my own biases. And like, that's part of what we do every day, you know? So I want to name that. Like, I think it's important. Like, he's saying having implicit bias doesn't mean you're racist, and he's right. Like, I'm not countering that in the video. And we are all a part of the culture that created us, right? And like, that's just a part of being a human, and part of what we're needing to do, and part of what we're hoping to do today is to kind of really work through what are some ways and steps that like, what are the ways in which that's impacting how we're showing up with our clients and showing up with our colleagues and showing up with our employees and showing up with our bosses, but also like, how do we confront that, and how do we really challenge that and take that challenge on, not as something to be afraid of or frustrated by, but something that's like, this is how we level up to the next step, right? So I think, Tanya, is this you? Are we doing another Chatterfall? Yes. You're muted, honey.
Stupid mute. All right, guys, so same as before, I'm going to ask you guys this question on the screen. I'm going to have all of you put your answers into the chat, but not hit enter until Rhie tells you to, because she's keeping a timer. We're going to give you 1 minute to answer it. And then when she says hit enter, everyone hit enter at the same time. So the discussion question is, what are some potential implicit biases about folks experiencing homelessness? You got the timer started, Rhie? Okay.
I was also muted.
Yes, you were.
I think we can do music for this one.
Is that your timer?
No.
Oh.
20 seconds. All right. Everybody hit enter. Oh, you did it. You wanna read anything out of the chat box that you're seeing, Tanya? You want me to do it? You're
Yeah,
on
absolutely. I was just kind of looking through them.
struggling with them a little bit, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna start with Christina. She says they are dangerous, they are lazy, they are a problem to solve. Someone else said they're drunks, they are drug addicts, they don't want to work. That is why they are on the streets. Untrustworthy, they are uneducated. All people experiencing homelessness are drug addicts. That they like living in hotels. Who likes to live in a hotel? Not true. They just can't get a home due to no job, minimum wage, prior evictions, bad credit. They picked this, or they are lazy. Yeah, hear that a lot. They are dangerous because they are in a desperate situation and could take it out on you or cause you harm. Because they see your resources from the perspective of just an average person out walking. They're lazy, grifters, dirty, mentally unstable, uneducated, alcoholics, unworthy, druggy.
This is really, go ahead.
I was just gonna read another comment. They're all on drugs and alcohol. They're criminals. They don't want to work or are lazy. The worst is their mistakes or circumstances are redeemable. What were you gonna say, Rhie?
Oh, this part's always so hard for me because
Yeah.
it's so much like labels that I know and
Yeah,
lived
same.
under. And I think that's kind of part of this is like I knew people thought that about me walking into every door that I walked in, you know?
Yeah.
And it affected the way I showed up and the way I was willing to be with other people or be around other people. How I was going to show up in a space was impacted by knowing that people think this.
Yeah.
And I think it's important when we look at this to think of the what are the systems like. If y'all are not familiar with the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, I would highly recommend, if you have an interest in your organization, do any type of like an anti-racism training. I would really recommend this organization, psap.org, People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. They do a training called Undoing Racism. And one of the things that they talk about in this training is they have you list out all the stereotypes, right? And they're doing an anti-racism training, so it's specific on like people of color or poor neighborhoods very often. And then they ask you like to name some of the systems that are like funded to like serve people that you just made this circle of all of these of these implicit biases that people carry. And you know, we are one of those services. And the next question they ask is, how are the ways in which our roles in these services act as a foot of oppression on these folks, right? And like, that's something for us to consider is like, what are the ways in which what we're doing every day is actively causing harm? And how do we mitigate that harm and know that we will cause harm, right? And be intentional about what it means to be accountable to that harm. Does anybody have any reflections? Like, because we have a video after this to talk about ways that we challenge implicit biases. But yeah, I'm just curious if anybody has reflections.
Hey, Rhie, I know I haven't spoken very much in this session, but when you said that, how do we act as the foot of oppression? It reminded me of an exercise that we have done on my team in the past about how we leverage our power internally at THN to promote race equity and how quickly it can devolve unintentionally into oppressive, impact. Intent does not always equal impact, right? And so, yeah, when you said that, I was like, oh my God, we haven't done that in a hot minute. And I think we have a lot of new staff. So it's like a really good time to kick that back up. So thank you for saying that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you need anybody to take you through a power analysis training, you know, you've got my number. Yeah. Tana, do you have more that you want to speak on about this?
Well, I mean, something I want to speak on is that I'm seeing all of these things about implicit bias, and a lot of those labels are things that I would have labeled myself as, just not working, an addict. And, I could have done things to improve my situation and I didn't. So I could have been labeled as lazy. And for those reasons, like I didn't access services because I knew for those years I was on the street that when I walked through the door that I was going to get that look, like, that look, yeah. or that voice, like, oh, it's so real. And I don't know, I had an emotional response to that, I guess is what I should say.
I think that is very, very real, Tanya. I appreciate you being like vulnerable in this space to share that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had a counselor look at me one time and say, "Why are you out here? You don't have to be here. There's some kids out here that are never going to make it. You're not one of them. What are you doing?" And I was like, "I know you're trying to be supportive right now." Yes. Aubrey brings up internalized bias, and listen, there's internalized like racial, like, ooh, there's so much to talk about that internalized piece where we turn them on ourselves. And that's Tanya, exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. Right. And that's part of the work, oops, sorry. Oh, I'm trying to get comfy. That's part of our job too, right? Part of our job is to bridge that connection back to kind of a place of like, you are a human and you are being seen. And part of what we are doing is offering that space if we are doing it, right? And there's so much brilliance in, like, kind of everybody, really, right? We all have some some level of internal brilliance, whether we tap into it or not, depends on a lot of factors, right? And part of what you get to be is someone who helps walk along be a path walker with somebody who's tapping into their own brilliance, right? But those implicit biases, like, they impact how we see others, how we see ourselves, how we interact in the world, what we expect. Are you going to listen to me because I'm a woman? Some people in the world might not, right? Aren't going to listen to me because I'm fat. Don't care what I have to say because I don't have an education, because I don't have a formal education. Like, I'm 21 credit hours away from a bachelor's degree. But like, again, my education is vast. My knowledge and depth of knowledge is wild. And it didn't come from a standard, like, approach to education, but that doesn't diminish the education that I have, right? Or make me, like, less intelligent. And so, ooh, Rick, I've come through, Rick. I don't even heard from you all day. I don't even know you were here. Rick Allison dropped this humans cognitive bias mistake. I would read it. Great resource. Thank you for sharing that. Do you want to tell us more about it? Okay.
Oh, sorry.
You're all right.
I'm technically challenged. But no, there's like that whole list of biases that shape our reality. And we're dealing with that. Everybody deals with it every day. It's just knowing about it, though, helps you a little bit to, I guess, address some of the impacts of that.
Absolutely. Rick, you're awesome. That was such a perfect segue into our next video, which is about how we can challenge our internalized biases and things that we can do. Give me 1 second and we're gonna hit play. This one's about 4 minutes, and then we have another discussion. Yeah, okay. I'm trying to keep my eye on time. I'm gonna have to rein myself in a little bit, y'all.
Take a look at this image. How many triangles do you see? 2, 6, maybe even 8? Ready for the answer? Well, actually, it's 0. There are no triangles. On average, our brains are working hard to try and process 11 million pieces of information every second. In reality, they consciously only capture about 50 pieces per second and actually process just 7, meaning we're constantly taking shortcuts to fill in the blanks. Unconscious bias is an example of a shortcut our brain takes to make snap judgments about people before we even realise we've done so. Everyone has deep subconscious preferences for people with similar characteristics to ourselves. Things like our own background, personal experiences, societal stereotypes, and cultural context all influence the perception we have of another person before we even get to know them. These biases can actually have harmful effects. They can prevent organisations from achieving diversity, as well as create barriers in people's careers. For example, research done by ActionAid and Care International found that female surge staff, that's the staff deployed in an emergency humanitarian response, felt agencies automatically turn to males to take up leadership positions, even if they're less qualified than their female counterparts. So, how can you tackle the influence of unconscious bias? Step 1. Become aware. There are dozens of different types of bias. Let's take a look at 3 common ones. Like me bias is when you have bias towards someone who looks like you or has a similar background as you. Confirmation bias is when we only listen to information that confirms our preconceptions. And anchor bias is when your mind anchors to the first piece of information that you were given about a subject. Anchor bias can particularly affect salary negotiations, and one example of this in the global development sector is the USAID biodata form.
Essentially, you have to write down your salary history for the last 3 years. And so if you are sending your biodata to a recruiter, the moment they open it and they look at your salary history, it's essentially them anchoring to that information. And from kind of that point on, you know, regardless of if it's a much higher position, if it's a much riskier position, if it's a much more technical position, it almost doesn't matter because the recruiter's mind has anchored to this information that you've provided to them.
Becoming aware of your unconscious bias can often be the hardest step. The first thing to do is look back at when you've made decisions at work that might have been influenced by your unconscious bias. Think about the particular situation you were in when you made the decision and how the decision making could be improved if you were more aware of your bias. Step 2. Find your trigger. Write a list of situations when you are most likely to experience these unconscious biases. Is it in meetings or before a particularly tough decision? Does it happen over email or when you talk to a specific group or person? Maybe it's when you're in certain moods, like when you're hungry, stressed, or tired. Step 3. Slow down. Next time you notice a trigger, try giving yourself a minute to pause and consider your response before instantly reacting.
So a great way to turn off that older part of your brain that makes these automatic snap judgments is simply to take 3 deep breaths. And you want to take, full breaths. So breathe in, then breathe out, and then count. And that helps you to calm down and turn off that fight or flight part of your brain and get back to the more normal part of your brain that can make a more rational decision.
Step 4. Do one small thing differently. You could ask a different person to kick off each meeting, or, after a meeting, ask for feedback from someone who wasn't vocal and seriously consider their opinion. Once you've implemented this action, take note and give yourself some deserved recognition for tackling your unconscious bias. Research shows that positive emotions help to cement things as habits. Now you know what unconscious bias is, maybe you can think of a time when it affected a decision you've made, or perhaps you've experienced the consequences of someone else's bias. Let us know your thoughts by commenting.
So yeah, she kind of resaid what I said, but what I like about this and what you're going to get in the next slide, you will receive these slides at the end, as well as a PDF of information about the thing we're about to talk about next, and all the links when this is over. But one of the things I would love to encourage y'all to do is do this practice. Like, even if you just do it, like take 5 minutes tomorrow sometime, you got 3 weeks between now and the next time we see each other, but do this practice of kind of asking yourself what, where, when, that you can think about when it's shown up, what are most likely to cause that to happen. And then that 3 deep breaths. Listen, she stole that from me. It was not the other way around. I'm joking. We just both are brilliant. And then do one small thing differently. And that's going to be the thing we leave with today and next time, is like, just do one small thing differently. That's it. There's a link that got dropped in the chat box by both Nikki and Craig is sharing it on my behalf to Harvard has a series of implicit bias tests that you can take, and they're really fascinating. And like if this is something you want to dig deeper into, I would really recommend going there, and just like it's pretty insightful and lets you learn things about yourself you might not know. And like it's pretty wild. So I would deeply recommend that y'all check that out when you get a chance. So yeah, when we're thinking about implicit bias at our job, and we're thinking about how that, like, all that whole list of things we just talked about, how homeless folks are often seen, right? People experiencing homelessness are often seen. Think about how those two things combine. How can you bring this into that setting of understanding that someone across the table thinks that, yes. Thank you, Nikki, for sharing that. It is great to do and debrief with people that you trust, right? You're like core people that you grow with. But with this, accepting the challenge piece, right? See how you can integrate this into your work and how it changes the way you are able to show up, and how that opens doors for real, like, actual collaboration on life together, right? And like, whether that's because you're inviting folks with lived experience as a board to like inform your policy, you're hiring folks with lived experience, or you're just like working with your clients. Like, this tool is really, really helpful for you to like begin to automatically do that identification, right? It takes practice like everything else does. I want to honor our time, and our next topic's a big one. So I'm going to dive headfirst into it, Tanya, if that's cool. All right. So yeah, do one small thing differently. Go take that test. We're going to talk about culture, and we're going to talk about a thing that makes people feel real uncomfortable sometimes. And I'm real sorry. And I'm going to name it as white dominant culture, because that is what we're talking about. And quite often it's referred to in like trainings and learnings. And this is adapted what we'll be talking about today from, excuse me, from the work of Tima Okun. And there will be a link that you can go if you want to learn more about it. But when we talk about culture, what are we talking about, right? Culture reflects the beliefs, the values, the norms, and the standards of a group, a community, a town, a state, a nation, your organization, you know, wherever. Like culture is the kind of embodiment of the things that we value, that we believe, and that we accept as normal, right? White supremacy or white dominant culture is like widespread ideology that's baked into the beliefs and the values and the norms of our groups. It's teaching us both like kind of overtly and covertly that whiteness holds value and that whiteness is value, right? It teaches us that people of color and Blackness in particular is not only valueless, but also dangerous and threatening, right? So let's reflect back on peanut butter, you think of jelly, and the conversation in that video around how, because of the way we're raised in the culture that we are just in, like we just live in this. This isn't, again, we have to honor and respect that like when we say words like white supremacy and racism, whiteness is a construct. So when I'm talking about it, I'm not talking about you as an individual white person, right? I'm talking about this broader construct that has impacted and has been like a driving force behind systems, institutions, and policies that have actively harmed particularly Black and Indigenous people in this country, but all people of color in this country, and that are like the dominant ideals, right? When you think of Prince Charming, when you think of Barbie, you have instant connotations with that, and they look a certain way, right? When you think of a welfare queen, what's the first thing you think of? I promise you I know what it is. I'm not mad at you for it because I grew up in this culture too. Interesting fact though, the woman who they were discussing when the term welfare queen was coined was a white woman living in Philadelphia in I think like 1982, maybe 81, maybe 76. Now I can't remember the year, dang it. But just like, yeah, and Michael and Susie Way said, culture is the water we all swim in and the air that we breathe. Yes, absolutely. And white dominant culture, white supremacy culture is reflected in our current realities of these disproportionate and systemic harm and violence that we see directed towards BIPOC people and communities in like everything: health, education, employment, incarceration, policing, the law. I mean, literally the list goes on. And there are characteristics, right, of white dominant culture that we all have inside of us, and we are all a part of, and it is all a part of what we do. So we are going to talk through those characteristics for the next 15 minutes, and then we're going to do an activity, and then we're going to have a discussion, and then we're going to close out. So bear with me, y'all, 56 minutes, and then we can all take a collective breath and go home. Which I'm sure we probably all are home right now, but you know what I mean. So let's talk about the traits and the cultural norms that are baked into kind of white supremacy, white dominant culture. And again, this is adapted from Tima Okun's work, and there is a website, whitesupremacyculture.info, that you will get a link to that. Don't let the title scare you off, right? Because like it can leave a bad taste in people's mouth. I honor and respect that. I know that. And it's okay for us to have a conversation that doesn't always feel great. Thank you so much, Craig, for throwing that in the chat box. So let's talk about cultural norms, right? So the number one strategy and number one norm we're going to look at is fear. White dominant culture wants us to be afraid, right? If we're afraid, we lose touch with our power and we become more easily manipulated, right? So fear is a big deal, and you see it everywhere. Fear is in our media, it's in the news, 24-hour news. My mom sits in her house. She's a different generation than I am, but she sits in her house and she has on like CNN or NBC News or whatever, 24 hours a day. Every time I'm on the phone with my mother, she's like, "Oh my God, did you hear about the most recent horrible thing that happened in the world?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't, because I can't do that because it makes me sick." but like fear is a tool of control, right? And control is key here. Maintaining supremacy is what this is about. Maintaining these systems that work the way they're designed and we see them as broken is what this really, all of this boils down to, is maintaining the systems, right? So we've got fear, we've got one right way, and underneath one right way, there are different types of, yes, Me and White Supremacy is a really good book. Fox News also scares me. I'm sorry. I'm trying to like keep up with this thing and also I'm the worst, y'all, but I'm also the best and you love me. So we'll get it together. We'll work it out. So we've moved on to one right way, which clearly I don't succumb to quite often. And under one right way, we have these other concepts like perfectionism, paternalism, objectivity, and what it means to be qualified, right? So there is a belief that there is one right way to do things. You know, I just said I'm not formally educated. I don't have like, which means in a lot of places, like, why are you listening to me, right? I did not follow the right path, right? And connected to the belief in like an objective perfect is this like idea that it is attainable, desirable for everyone, right? And it's connected to this belief that I am the qualified person to know what the perfect right way is for myself and others. And again, this is all about, we do things this way, we do them the same way every day. Here's the thing, when I first started working in this field, my very first day on the job, I was sent to the National Alliance and Homelessness Conference in LA. It was my first day on the job. I met my boss at the airport and we flew to Los Angeles. And I get there and I'm surrounded by a sea of lovely, kind, well-intentioned human beings. And I had a big chip on my shoulder when I first started doing this work around like, y'all know that if the way that you've been doing things forever actually worked, then none of us would have a job. Why are we not here trying to work ourselves out of jobs? Why are we hanging on to things that we know are not effective or know are effective in harmful ways, right? And that comes down to that concept of that thinking of there's only one right way, which leads us into the either or and the binary, right? Another cultural norm that we see everywhere. This like reduces the complexity of life, right? It tells us that, again, it's either or, it's black and white. Nothing is black and white. It is all nuance, right? And when we lose the nuance of our relationships with each other into yes or no or right or wrong, we're reinforcing this concept of like urgency, one right way of doing things, perfectionist thinking, and abuse of power. And that's really that either or gets us caught up in that. So when it comes down to it's like a yes or no, or it's an either or, try to like challenge that with like, what could it be if it was yes and? What could it be? You know, I'm sure y'all hear both and all the time, but that both and really is a challenge to dominant cultural norms. And so sometimes you might want to roll your eyes when you hear somebody say it. I know I do, especially if it's a white lady in power. And like, if there are white ladies in power in this room, please do not take offense to that. Again, I'm working through my own chips on my shoulders, right? But like, I want to roll my eyes at both and a lot, but honestly, both and is a really good tool and really good way to counter this kind of way of thinking and being that we have adapted as being the right and the dominant and the normal way. And if we're not doing it this way, we're doing it wrong, right? And when we do that, we miss out on the brilliance that comes in different packages. So then we talk about denial and defensiveness. And this is the habit of denying and defending against the ways in which white supremacy, it like shows up in the collective and in our individual, right? And that happens all the time. And that happens to every one of us. And often when somebody comes to you with a challenge and you get defensive, the first thing I check in about to this day, if I get defensive, is, am I defending whiteness right now? Am I defending power? And that's what's happening in my body. Am I afraid that this challenge that was brought to me is going to make me have to look at something and go, I didn't do that right. I made a mistake. I have to let loose or let go some of the control that I have in here. So when defensiveness pops up in your body, the very first thing you need to do is go, wait a minute, why is that here? Right? Check in with yourself, because oftentimes it's an unconscious defense of an institution that we don't support. We don't even believe in it, but it's in our bodies because, like they said in the chat box, it is the water we swim in and the air that we breathe, right? The next one we want to talk through is the right to comfort and fear of conflict. This is the internalization or the belief that you or I have a right to comfort, so we can't tolerate conflict, right? And this very often shows up in whiteness. This very often shows up in your fear to talk to your boss. Like, you might check someday and go, am I afraid to talk to my boss because my boss holds power over me? Or is there an additional layer, right? Because power is layers. Power is the onion, right? It is not one thing. Jim Ward is not just a white man who runs THN. Jim, I'm sorry also that I keep picking on you, but you are who I know in the space, so I feel most comfortable to do.
I just want to clarify, do not run THN, but point taken.
Okay, sorry, he doesn't run THN, but point taken. He's got a lot of power, right?
That's
He don't run the show, but like,
there is definitely power there. Yeah.
There's power in his position and his title, right? And oftentimes we like will bend to power. We will be like, oh, power has a right to not feel uncomfortable and not feel bad. I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable or feel bad. And that can often stem from a place of fear and protecting yourself, but also checking in on your intersections of access to power and privilege. If you have a higher intersection of access to power and privilege, and you over here worried about this person's right to comfort and being afraid to call them out, you are not leveraging your access. If I am sitting in a room with Jim Ward and I hear him or see him do something that is openly and like openly not okay, I will call him out openly. Now, if I see him do something that is subtle and doesn't feel right, I will do that quietly. But if it is open and there's an abuse of power happening in front of me, I do not care about right to comfort. If you are abusing power, and I don't think Jim would, which is part of why I'm using him in this example, but if you're abusing power and you're doing that in front of me, then I am not here for like silence around that. And part of that is because I have access to proximity to power and privilege that protects me, right? So we have to be mindful of that layer of what that means. I have colleagues who do not have the same levels of access to power and privilege and would not be protected to call Jim out, but I would be. And so it's worth it for me to take that risk and get uncomfortable and push a little further if what I'm trying to do is move like I don't like the move the needle, because I'm here for like, we're in a movement. This is a movement. This is a change, a shift of culture. If we want to see the culture shift, we have to start shifting, right? Okay, I know, I'm sorry, y'all, buckle in. We're going to get through this. Another of the dominant cultural norms that we are super sucked into in this society is this idea of individualism. This story that we did it on our own without help. We pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps, and we remember that. It's a toxic denial, right? We have an interdependence on one another. The reality is not one of us is sitting here on a device that we built. Not one of us is sitting here wearing clothes that we made. Maybe somebody is wearing like a shirt or something that they made, but like they didn't spin the fabric to make it a fabric. You know what I'm saying? We would not exist without other human beings. And the idea of individualism is super gross and toxic because it erases the humanity of the people who made this device. It makes me able to move through the world going like, oh yeah, I did it all on my own. If you ever hear me tell my story about how I got off the street, I'm gonna tell you right now, it took me up until a year ago to acknowledge the role that I played in doing that, to be able to say, you know, actually, I took the opportunities that were put in front of me, because I have been saying from day one of getting off the street, I'd had never done it without the community of people that were around me. It would have never happened if I didn't have community that was there to hold me, to carry me, to be next to me while I was trying to figure my shit out. I couldn't have done it on my own. And we have a toxic belief of meritocracy and individualism, and it is rooted in, again, this concept of like we got to have individualism, because if we don't, then we got to acknowledge that we stole land, that we slaughtered people, and that everything we have was built on the backs of slaves. And people don't want to do that. People aren't ready for that, right? And the reality is, to this day, the humanity of the person who made this phone and the conditions in which they're living, not okay, right? We know that. And so we preach individualism to shut that off, to get away from that feeling, because otherwise then we got all this guilt, and what do we do with that? Nobody wants to feel bad. Sorry, I'm tangenting again, but it's important information, so I feel like okay with doing that. The next one we want to look at, progress is more, better, and quantity over quality. How many of you have sat in a room and heard a director going, we need to get an additional like 8 people in beds by the end of this month. And if we don't, then blah, blah, blah. And you're looking at them going, we don't have anything that's habitable. We don't have any place that I would put a person. We don't have anything to give a person. And it's like, well, we got to do it because we always got to do more. We always got to do bigger. We always got to do better. Always, always, always more, bigger, better. Right.
Or we don't have the staff to manage that many people.
Yeah, we can't do the like services needed, the wraparound, the like making sure that like we can
They
put them
won't
in a
get
house.
what the clients won't get what they need with the amount of staff we have.
Right, right. And that goes into, I think, urgency as well. And I want to name about both Progress is More Better and urgency, that in this particular field, these are really hard ones because we are existing in a dialectic between, right? We exist in that tension between, right, this idea of progress is more better, and because progress is more better for us means people are being housed, right? And that sense of urgency, which the sense of urgency for us is we don't want anybody to die outside, right? And like we are struggling in those places because these approaches and these ways, thank you for being here, these approaches and these cultural norms that we've adopted, right, for our work have a very specific and very high, like to our heart's feeling of like, no, we are urgent. Problem is though, if we move too quickly and we don't have that intentionality, we don't have that recognition, right? Iteration without accountability doesn't mean anything. Accountability means we got to slow down for a second. Slowing down means that our progress is going to look like quality over quantity, but quantity is what is measurable, right? And so these are things that we have to combat in the work that we do that are real. These two ones in particular hit our like bellies in our work, right? And then worship of the written word is the last one, which is that concept of honoring only what is written, and even then only what's written to a specific standard. If I sent out an email right before this call, in fact, I was going through my slides and I had a word misspelled on one of them. I was like, oh my God, I have to fix that, because in my mind I'm going, I can't present in front of the state of Texas, balance of state, and have this misspelled word, because then they're going to be like, oh, this woman doesn't know what she's doing. She doesn't know what she's talking about, right? That's wild, because you would have read the misspelled word and knew what it was. But we have this hold on kind of these standards of what is written, and if we don't write it in a certain way, if we don't communicate in a certain way, and it ignores the fact that so much of our history, so much of our culture has been passed down verbally, but that's because that history and culture is not white history and culture. You see what I'm saying? So these are cultural norms that we're faced with every single day. And with that said, looking at our time, I'm going to actually pass this over to Tanya, and we're going to do a group exercise. So for those of you that are still here, you're about to get shot off into some breakout rooms, and please be present in that space because it's smaller rooms. And Tanya, I'm passing it over to you, boo. You're muted, honey.
I keep doing that. All right, so like Rhie said, we're going to go into some breakout rooms. Each group will have their own question to discuss. And you're going to discuss one of these white dominant cultural norms. Oh, there went my screen. Okay. So while you're in the groups, which one of these were you consciously or unconsciously taught growing up? Discuss these norms in your organizations. Are they ever discussed? Which are embraced? Which are being challenged? Have any been replaced? And what would your work culture look like if they were replaced for both staff and clients? I believe the groups were randomly picked.
We're about to launch.
So let's launch.
At the worship of the written word, and I'm just thinking back to my time in direct service with program agreements and how complicated they can be and long they can be, and needlessly long, and even lease agreements, right? Lease agreements are, I don't know a single person that's ever read an entire lease agreement. It's only, I say it's only 8 pages and 0.6 font or whatever. But they're incredibly complicated, and So I don't know. That's a really powerful one. I feel like, even though it doesn't jump out at first, I think it's a really insidious way that white supremacy culture is upheld.
Yes, Jim. Yes, thank you. Does anybody else want to talk about how the white dominant cultural norms stand in the way of working with clients and colleagues? I saw a lot of you guys talking in those chat rooms.
Well, I'll have to agree with Jim as far as all of these forms and getting help for the clients. Like for Section 8 housing and Medicaid and Medicare and SSI, it's like, oh my goodness, you have to have a law degree of some sort in order to be able to read all the fine print and answer all these questions. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh my goodness, I have a master's education and I still can't understand all these forms. How can I expect my poor clients, with just a high school education to know how to fill all of these out? And then they don't have computers. A lot of the stuff it's computerized. So you have to fill out all the forms by computer. They're trying to do it on their cell phones. I'm like, no, you're not going to be able to do that 20-page form on your cell phone. It's going to time out. You're not going to be able to complete it. I said, here, you're going to have to go to the library. It's to the point now where we have computers here. So when I have families, I can pull out the computers and I can help them while they're doing them out in our little waiting area out there. But yeah, it's hard.
Thanks, Sonia. It is hard. It's really hard.
I was wondering if I may chime in.
Yes, please, John.
I was going to say of a lot of the white, dominant cultural norms, I think that that I've sensed, at least within my community, I think we tend to see a lot of competition amongst even nonprofits. I think that's kind of ingrained in the structure of the system. And I understand to some degree we're always competing for resources. But I try to counteract that within the community and other service providers and housing providers within our community to have much more of a collaborative approach instead of kind of trying to compete for resources or compete for we won and we did you want to celebrate victories, but I don't think we want to make it as much of a joined and collaborative effort as we possibly can. And I try to provide that with every meeting, case conferencing that we go to, or anytime I'm ever interacting with any of the community providers that we work with that I consider colleagues, to let them understand that we're all in this together. We may have our own respective policies and agency directives and objectives and things, but that we're all have the same goal. And I think we tend to forget that because we all feel like we're, even as nonprofits, which we're not competing for profit, that we're competing against one another for, I wouldn't say supremacy. I don't think that's the right choice of word, but performance, I suppose. I don't know if those are the right choice of words, but and so every time I always try to make a concerned effort to make it much more of a collaborative race together than separate. So
what if it's competition for recognition, and then like everything that's like tied up in that whole thing, right? Like, whoa,
yeah,
that's heavy, John.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, you don't want to take away from those who have performed and done excellent in their field and within in their housing program. You don't want to do that and negate it because but it should be I don't know, that's a hard one, Jim. Yeah, that's a hard one. Yeah.
I think, I'm sorry, y'all. I forgot to eat before our session started, and it has been a long session with no food. So I'm like snacking a little bit on blueberries and cheese. I'm gonna swallow this. But John, I want to hop in while you're here because everything you just said, y'all don't need me teaching this training. Y'all need John teaching this training.
No,
right?
No,
y'all need the excellence in your system to be shining. You know what I'm saying? What you're saying and speaking on, John, it's huge, right? Because what we're talking about is shifting our mindsets from hierarchical power structures to collaborative ones, to lateral ones, to ones where recognition for one organization is celebrated by all organizations, because all organizations had to get there. And so now I'm gonna do a thing I wasn't planning to do, but I really want to because of you. So I'm gonna just say this really quickly, and Hope, I'm with you too. John, next time you go into training, call me, because like I need to learn. But I'm gonna share this with you because I think what you're speaking on, John, this speaks to our whole system, right? There was a farmer who grew excellent quality corn. Every year he won the award for best grown corn. One year, a newspaper reporter interviewed him and learned something interesting about how he grew it. The reporter discovered that the farmer shared his seed corn with his neighbors. Reporter says, how can you afford to share your best seed corn with your neighbors when they're entering corn in competition with yours every year? The reporter asked. And the farmer said, why, sir, didn't you know? The wind picks up pollen from the ripening corn and swirls it from field to field. If my neighbors grow inferior corn, cross-pollination will steadily degrade the quality of my corn. If I am to grow good corn, I must help my neighbors grow good corn. So it is with our lives and our work. Those who want to live meaningfully and well must help enrich the lives of others, for the value of a life is measured by the lives it touches. And those who choose to be happy must help others find happiness, for the welfare of each is bound up with the welfare of all, right? The welfare of each one of your orgs is bound up in how well each one of your orgs is doing.
Yes.
You know, I didn't mean to hop up in here. We're supposed to be talking and having reflection time, but listen, John, you like lit my fire up. Ooh, like, because you're right. Yes, there's competition for dollars. Dollars are zero sum. There's no lie about that. There's also, let's start looking outside of our standard places of looking for funding, right? Let's start looking outside of where we can. Let's start looking at what does it mean for my organization to support this organization and getting funding that could help my organization. But I recognize that this organization is doing this thing differently and better, and that's okay. Doesn't mean I'm not doing well, because what I do rocks, you know, but this organization is hitting this what better. What can I do to support that organization and getting that funding? And next round, what can that organization do to support me in getting the funding, right? What does it look like to work collectively, right? Collective power is how you overturn dominant culture. That's what you do.
We're building an organization like that in Galveston. We'll talk about that another time.
Yes.
We'll talk
Let's get
about
some
that.
more folks talking while we have
John,
time.
where are you at?
Huh?
John?
Oh, where am I located?
Yeah.
I'm out of Denton County, Denton, Texas.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I'm in Dallas County, so yeah, you're not too far from me. Grand Prairie.
Your neighbor. Yeah, hi neighbor.
Hi.
I just wanted to, I completely 100% agree. It has to be more of a collective, but I think it's almost innate within human nature to kind of have that. I understand the ambition to want to do better and be better as an organization, as an individual level on all those different tiers. But yeah, 100%. If we're able to collaborate and collectively work with another organization that then excels and over exceeds their expectations and gets the resources or gets a new program expansion or any of those things, let's work together to collaborate. Maybe that next round of funding, maybe that next season, the next year, they can return and reciprocate, and we can collaborate and work together. And I genuinely, I think I may have verbalized my opinions about, but I think I'm very proud to work in the particular county that I work in the organization and the coalition that I'm part of.
No, you definitely should be. I mean, y'all showed up. Like, we can talk more about it later if y'all want to talk about it as a community, but y'all showed up in this last round, and it was obvious the coordination and collaboration that was happening. So
yeah, thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, John, for sharing that. And thank you guys, Rhie, for chiming in. That was awesome. I really like that about the farmer. All right, so we're going to move on to the next question, guys. What can you and your organization do to shift these beliefs and behaviors to ones that serve authentic collaboration? Does anybody want to?
John sort of answered that, saying about how organizations should be working together for the benefit of of the clients and the community.
Yes.
But what are ways you can, right? Your orgs can do a lot, but like if you sit across the table from a client, What can you do to shift beliefs and behaviors, right? That you may hold. And maybe it's too soon to ask that question. You know, maybe I'll got to sit and marinate on this for a little while, and that's okay too. I think it is important to go.
Well, I was just going to say, in our group, we talked about the one right way to do things. And as we were going through it, it occurred to me, I have a whole stack of resources back here that I work with my, case management clients on. And I've always kind of presented it as like, here's this great information that's going to help you. And it never occurred to me that I really should be presenting that as, here's some great information that might be helpful to you. And it also might be absolute trash to you. So let's go through it and take what works for you, and the rest of it, like, just to completely ignore it. And it's all about just, I can still use those resources, but making sure I'm presenting them in a way that doesn't say, this is how you have to do it to be successful.
Yes,
I'm
Sarah, yes.
celebrating. Yeah.
Yes.
I have a whole booklet, a whole brochure of different organizations within the community and what they do and how they can help you. And that's important because you don't want to refer someone someplace where they're not going to get that help. You're going to tell them, oh, I got this place that's really going to help you, with your rent. It doesn't matter if you don't have children here in GPISD in our school district, as long as your address is here in Grand Prairie, they'll be able to help you if they have funding. So it's also good to know about all of your organizations and the help within your community. I have it all on a brochure, and here's the whole pamphlet. You can look through it and see what other resources you may need.
That's on point, Sonia, that's like being a librarian, right? You're not telling them they have to use this. You're saying, here's some options for you. What works for you, right? And that really is the key, because not everything is going to work for everybody. And we know that. And we don't want to direct somebody to the wrong place either, right? We want to make sure that like we know that, like, if I know this organization over here only does this one thing and is not a thing this person needs, I'm not going to be like, go to this organization, or they're going to be like, I want to go to that organization. I'm not going to not say, hey, just heads up, that organization you don't meet the criteria, whatever, right? Like, it's about transparency and honesty, right?
Right.
But that part of that is being like seeing that whole person on the other side of you. I'm going to stop our screen sharing because we have 8 minutes left, and I'm going to do a quick check-in with folks. And I just want to know, like, how are y'all doing? What's going on? What did stuff come up for you today that like you want to dig deeper into? I know we've slowly dwindled in size, which like totally fair, because it is almost 5 o'clock for y'all. You got any reflections or final thoughts that you want to share?
I mean, I'm just really looking forward to part 2. But this has been immensely helpful for me, and I hope it has been for others.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope so too. The next section is going to be on February 28th at the same time, same bat time, same bat place. I don't know if it's the same place, but you have a registration link. It's going to be a lot on operationalizing, right? And like how it is that we take all of these big concepts we've talked about today, and how do we like put them into practice? Like, what does it actually look like? What are some tools and techniques for ways that we can actually like do this and have some little bit of structure around how-to of it all, right? I have a massive request of the folks who are still here, and this is going to go out also in an email. I have a feedback form thing. Takes like 5 seconds. If y'all are down, I don't know what you just sent out. Hold on, Greg, because that's not Craig. Hold on, baby. Oh, it's the right one. You got me. All right, boo. I just did the shorthand version of it. If y'all don't mind, like just jotting your thoughts down. It'll help also direct some of what we're going to talk about next time, because I want to hear from you, like, what are the things that really resonated and you're like, dang, I would do that, but what's the like step to that isn't like, that kind of thing. It's space there for feedback, and you can even be like, Rhie, you talk too damn much, and I'll be like, you are right, and thank you.
Alejandro, I'm sorry, I just read Alejandro's comment. He said he really enjoys the Alejandro, really enjoyed the meeting. And as far as her organization goes, we need better training, because the staff at her organization talks down to clients and causes clients to seek help from just another individual, causing an unfair caseload. And this is something I have experienced myself, to where all the clients on my program, not all of them, but a lot of them, will rely more heavily on me because of my language and the way I speak. And sometimes that language isn't professional, right? But they know that I'm a person with lived experience. They know that I understand, and they know that I'm not talking down to them when I say, hey, look, like, is this working for you or is this not working for you? You know what I'm saying? And they just feel talked down to by other staff. So yeah, I get that. So thanks, Alejandra, for saying that. So yeah, I think your organization does need a training, as does mine. They're getting it.
Yeah, that
Don't worry.
caseload, that burnout is real.
Yeah,
Well, Tanya, do you want to start us off in our goodbyes? And I'll close us out.
Yeah. Goodbye. No. Okay, bye.
Deuces.
See you guys next time. No. I just want to say thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being engaged with us. Thank you for hearing us. Because again, it's really important to feel heard, and I feel like you all heard us. I feel very valued in this space, and I want to thank you all for that as well. I look forward to seeing you guys next time.
Tanya, thank you. I'm like, well, I don't have any thoughts. I don't need to say nothing. No, I echo Tanya. Thank you all for staying. 4 hours is a long time on a Zoom call. And we have both really enjoyed, or I'm speaking for you, sorry. I have really enjoyed this opportunity to be in community with you, and I'm excited about our next opportunity. So that'll be February 28th. It is three Tuesdays from today. And I'm going to be in Houston the week before that. So if you're in the Houston area, what up? And thank you all. Yeah, there's a lot to think about. There's a lot. It's pretty heavy, this work. And I want to thank you all for being here and leaning in and being okay with being uncomfortable, because this shit is hard. And this group of people, you guys rocked it. And I just appreciate you. Look, it made my 4 hours fly by. So thank you all again. Go get 3 minutes back to your life. Go do all the things. And Craig is going to send out materials with all the good fun stuff. There's a PDF on dominant cultural norms if you want to dig more into that, and then all the links from today. Thank y'all.
All right, y'all. I'll probably send that email out first thing in the morning. I need to let this video process upload, then I'll send all the goodies out.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank y'all. We'll see y'all soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.